The boardroom froze as Daniel Cole stood up his janitor's uniform stark against the executive suits. Blood pounded in his ears. "Don't sign the $4.2 billion deal," he said, voice stronger than he intended. Cameras flashed outside. Reporters awaited the historic acquisition. Alexis Monroe, 34-year-old CEO of Monroe Industries, locked eyes with him. Her pen hovered over the contract. Security moved toward Daniel. His daughter's future hung in the balance. The former Wall Street prodigy, now cleaning floors, had exactly 10 seconds before being dragged out. Alexis raised her hand, stopping security. Everyone out, she commanded, except him. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. How had it come to this? 3 weeks ago, he'd been invisible, just another blue uniform, pushing a mop across polished floors. Now he stood before the most powerful woman in Chicago business, challenging a deal that would make headlines across the financial world. A deal that would destroy thousands of lives, including his own. He thought of Ava waiting at home, her insulin running low, her future uncertain. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't stay silent. Not again. The evening before Daniel's confrontation, snowflakes drifted past the windows of Monroe Industries' executive floor. Most employees had departed hours ago, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and coffee. Daniel Cole moved silently through the corridors, emptying trash bins, as he'd done for the past 18 months. The pristine hallways felt different at night, empty of power suits and clicking heels, devoid of artificial smiles and calculated handshakes. He preferred it this way. The silence was honest, at least. Daniel paused outside the conference room, noticing the light still on. Through the frosted glass, he could make out a solitary figure. He recognized her silhouette immediately. Alexis Monroe, the wunderkind CEO who had taken over her father's company at just 30. Stories about her brilliance and ruthlessness filled breakroom gossip. Though Daniel rarely participated, he had learned the hard way that staying invisible was the safest strategy. For a moment, he stood watching her work, struck by how similar her hunched-over posture was to his own daughter when concentrating on homework. The thought of 9-year-old Ava waiting at Mrs. Jenkins' apartment made him check his watch. He needed to finish his shift and pick her up before 10:30. Daniel pushed his cart forward, intending to skip the room, and return later when a stack of papers slid from the conference table to the floor, followed by Alexis's frustrated sigh. Professional habit took over, and he knocked softly. "Excuse me, ma'am. Would you like me to come back later?" Her head snapped up, surprise flashing across her face, as though she'd forgotten other humans existed in the building. "No, it's fine. Come in." Her voice carried the slight edge of someone interrupted mid-thought. As Daniel entered, Alexis gathered her documents, hastily dropping several in the process. He moved to help, bending down to collect the scattered papers. That's when he saw it, a spreadsheet with highlighted columns showing employee counts across multiple divisions. One column labeled Post-Acquisition Reductions caught his eye. Numbers in cold red showed thousands of positions marked for elimination after the Tech Vision merger, including the entire janitorial staff of the Chicago office. Daniel's breath caught as he recognized his department code among those slated for outsourcing. His fingers tightened on the paper memory, flashing to Ava's medical bills piled on his kitchen table. The overdue rent notice. The insulin prescription that needed refilling next week. The modest stability he'd built after losing everything was about to crumble again. "Thank you," Alexis said, reaching for the papers. But Daniel hesitated, his eyes still fixed on the document. She followed his gaze, understanding dawning on her face. "That's confidential information," she said, her tone hardening. "Of course, sorry," Daniel replied, handing over the papers with a deliberately blank expression he'd perfected during his downfall 3 years ago. As he turned to leave, Alexis called after him. "You're Daniel, right, night shift?" He paused, surprised she knew his name. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a moment, then dismissed him with a nod. "Good night, then." Daniel finished his shift on autopilot mind racing. By morning, he'd made his decision. It wasn't just about his job anymore. It was about all the families who would suffer while executives collected bonuses. Some things were worth the risk, worth standing up for, even when you had everything to lose. The small 2-bedroom apartment Daniel shared with Ava sat 14 floors up in a building where the elevator worked 1 day out of 3. Tonight was not one of those days. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step a reminder of how far he'd fallen from his corner office at Goldman Sachs. He turned his key in 3 separate locks before entering. The apartment was modest but meticulously organized, the discipline of a single parent evident in every carefully arranged corner. Mrs. Jenkins, a retired teacher from the floor below, sat at their small kitchen table, glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed Ava's homework. "She's brilliant, you know," Mrs. Jenkins said without looking up. "Got every single math problem right. And these were meant for seventh graders." Daniel smiled, his first genuine one all day. "Takes after her mother." At the sound of his voice, Ava came running from her bedroom, dark curls bouncing. "Daddy!" She threw herself into his arms, and Daniel lifted her, momentarily forgetting the weight on his shoulders. "Did you behave for Mrs. Jenkins?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Ava nodded solemnly. "We did fractions and made spaghetti, and I took my insulin exactly when I was supposed to." "That's my girl." He set her down and reached for his wallet to pay Mrs. Jenkins her usual rate plus a little extra when he could manage it. Tonight he hesitated, mental calculations running through his head. The rent was due in 4 days. Ava's prescription needed refilling. Mrs. Jenkins waved away his outstretched hand. "You can get me next time, Daniel. That little girl is a delight." After she left, Daniel heated up leftovers and sat with Ava while she chatted about her day. He nodded at all the right places, but his mind kept returning to those spreadsheets, to the thousands of names reduced to numbers in a column. "Daddy, you're not listening," Ava said, her perceptive brown eyes so like Laura's studying his face. "What's wrong?" Daniel forced a smile. "Just tired, sweetie. Tell me again about your science project." "It's about insulin," she said proudly. "I'm showing how it works in the body. Mrs. Rodriguez said it was very advanced." Daniel's chest tightened. At 9 years old, Iva understood diabetes better than most adults. She'd had to since her diagnosis 2 years ago, right after Laura's death. "Can I ask you something, Daddy?" Ava's voice had grown serious. "Anything, sweetheart." "Do you miss being a numbers person?" She used the term she'd created for his former career, unable to pronounce financial analyst when she was younger. Daniel considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss the work, but I don't miss the people or the choices I had to make." "Was it hard?" "The choices." An image flashed in his mind, the conference room at Goldman, his supervisor leaning over his shoulder, pointing to figures that Daniel knew were manipulated. "Fix the numbers, not the deal." "Yes," he said simply. "It was hard." Ava nodded as if she understood completely. "That's why you always tell me to do the right thing even when it's hard, because you didn't once and it made you sad." Daniel stared at his daughter, stunned by her perception. "Who told you that?" "Nobody, I just know." She touched his cheek. "But you're not sad all the time. You're the best daddy." Later, after Ava was asleep, Daniel stood at their small kitchen counter, spreading out Ava's medical bills, the rent notice, and his own calculations. The insulin alone cost $435 a month with his current insurance. Without it, he opened his laptop, a relic from his previous life, and began researching tech vision, the tech company Monroe Industries was acquiring. He worked until 3 a.m., the familiar rhythm of financial analysis coming back to him like muscle memory. What he found made his stomach knot. The numbers didn't add up. Tech vision was grossly overvalued, its innovation pipeline empty, its patents either expiring or under legal challenge. This wasn't just about job cuts, it was fraud on a massive scale. Daniel closed his laptop and stared out the window at Chicago's glittering skyline. Somewhere out there, Alexis Monroe slept in what he imagined was a penthouse with views that made his look like a postage stamp. She was about to make the biggest mistake of her career, one that would destroy lives, including his and Ava's. The question was, what would it cost him to stop it? Morning found Alexis Monroe in her penthouse gym running on a treadmill that faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Each step was precisely calculated, 6.5 miles per hour, 2%, incline, 45 minutes. Efficiency in all things was her motto. Her phone rang, her father, right on schedule. She tapped her earpiece without breaking stride. "Morning, Dad." William Monroe's voice carried the gruff authority that had built Monroe Industries from a regional manufacturing company into a technology conglomerate. "Today's the big day. Nervous?" "Everything's in place. The board unanimously approved. Legal has cleared all hurdles." Alexis kept her voice even, betraying none of the unease that had kept her awake last night. "Biggest acquisition in company history. Your grandfather would be proud." A pause. "Your mother, too." Alexis increased the treadmill's speed slightly. The tech vision integration will position us perfectly for the AI market expansion. That's my girl, always focused on the strategy. Her father chuckled. The Monroe way. Speaking of which, I'm flying in tonight. Thought we could have dinner after the signing. Alexis hesitated. Dinner with her father meant 3 hours of subtle criticism wrapped in business talk. I have calls with our Tokyo office scheduled for tonight. Reschedule them. This is a milestone, Alexis, worth celebrating properly. Of course, I'll make reservations at Gibson's, her father's favorite steakhouse where the staff still treated him like the CEO despite his retirement 3 years ago. After hanging up, Alexis stepped off the treadmill and checked her messages. 57 new emails since she'd gone to sleep. A text from James Bennett, her CFO. Meeting with Harlow at 8, joined Richard Harlow, chairman of the board, and her father's oldest friend had been skeptical when Alexis took over. 3 years of record profits hadn't fully convinced him she wasn't just William Monroe's daughter playing at business. She texted back, on my way. Her penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek downtown high-rise. Minimalist furnishings, art selected by a decorator, views from every room, the perfect executive showplace. And just as empty as it had been when she bought it 3 years ago. As she showered and dressed, Alexis's mind returned to the janitor from last night, Daniel. The way he'd looked at that spreadsheet, not with confusion, but with immediate comprehension. The flash of recognition in his eyes before he'd masked it with that carefully blank expression. There was something about him that didn't fit. Something in his posture, his speech patterns. The way he'd scanned those documents like someone used to reading financial reports. 90 minutes later, Alexis sat across from Bennett and Harlow in the executive dining room. Bennett, with his perfectly tailored suit and calculating smile, had been her father's hire. Harlow, silver-haired and patrician, represented old money and older connections. The final numbers look solid, Bennett said, sliding a folder across the table. Post-integration projections exceed our initial estimates by 7%. Alexis opened the folder, scanning the figures. These synergy estimates seem optimistic. Standard practice in acquisitions of this size, Bennett replied smoothly. We project workforce optimization of approximately 22% across all divisions. That's corporate speak for firing a fifth of our workforce, Alexis said, her tone neutral. Harlow leaned forward. It's business, Alexis. Your father understood these necessities. I understand them too, Richard. I just like to call things what they are. She closed the folder. What about the R&D pipeline concerns I raised? Bennett and Harlow exchanged glances. TechVision's next-gen AI platform is still in development, Bennett said, but our technical team has reviewed their progress. It's revolutionary. I'd like to see the technical assessment, Alexis said. Harlow checked his watch. We have reporters arriving at 11. The contract signing is at noon. Perhaps we should focus on today's milestone rather than operational details that can be addressed post-acquisition. Alexis recognized the dismissal but pressed on. One of the maintenance staff saw confidential documents last night. The layoff plans. Bennett's expression tightened. Which employee? Daniel Cole, night shift janitor. I'll have HR handle it, Bennett said. Security issue. We can't have cleaning staff accessing sensitive materials. He didn't access anything. I dropped the papers. Harlow waved dismissively. Regardless, we should ensure he understands the confidentiality requirements. Now, about your remarks for the press. The conversation shifted, but Alexis found herself thinking about the janitor's face when he'd seen those documents. Not surprise exactly. Recognition, understanding, as if he'd seen such numbers before. After the meeting, Alexis returned to her office and pulled up the company directory. Daniel Cole, hired 18 months ago, night shift maintenance. No photo in the system, typical for lower-level employees. She opened his personnel file, scanning quickly. Previous employment, various maintenance positions, education blank, references 2 former supervisors at cleaning companies. Nothing unusual, nothing to explain the nagging feeling that there was more to Daniel Cole than a man who cleaned offices at night. On impulse, she typed his name into a search engine. Thousands of results. Daniel Cole was a common name. She refined the search, Daniel Cole, Chicago Finance. 3 hits. One caught her attention, a small mention in a Wall Street Journal article from 3 years ago about layoffs at Goldman Sachs. The name was buried in a paragraph about senior analysts. Let go during a restructuring. Alexis leaned back in her chair, mind working. Could it be the same person, a finance professional, now working as a janitor? If so, why had he hidden his background on his application? And more importantly, if he had a finance background and had seen the tech vision numbers, what exactly had he recognized in those spreadsheets? Her phone buzzed, a reminder about the press briefing in 30 minutes. She closed the browser window, decision made. After the signing, she'd look into Daniel Cole more thoroughly. For now, she had a $4.2 billion acquisition to finalize. Across town, Daniel dropped Ava at school, kneeling to hug her goodbye. "Remember what we talked about last night?" he said quietly. Ava nodded, her expression serious beyond her years. "Do the right thing even when it's hard." "That's right. And no matter what happens, I love you more than anything in the world." She studied his face. "Are you going to do something hard today, Daddy?" Daniel's throat tightened. "Yes, sweetie, I am." "Will it be okay?" He forced a smile. "I hope so." "Be brave," she said, kissing his cheek before running toward her classroom. Daniel watched her go, wondering if he was making the biggest mistake of his life, or finally correcting the one he'd made 3 years ago. At Monroe Industries, he changed into his janitor's uniform, the blue fabric rough against his skin. In his pocket, he placed 3 items, the employee roster he'd printed from the maintenance computer, showing families' years of service, medical dependents, a USB drive with his analysis of TechVision's financials, and a small photo of Ava. On his way to the executive floor, Daniel passed the men's restroom and heard raised voices from inside. He slowed his cart, recognizing Bennett's distinctive clipped tones. "Don't care what it takes, Richard. This deal closes today. We're too exposed if it doesn't." "Keep your voice down," Harlow replied. "The TechVision people will be here in an hour. Everything's proceeding as planned." "What about the girl? She's asking questions about the R&D pipeline." A snort of derision. "Alexis is just trying to prove she's done her homework. Like her father, she'll prioritize the big picture when it matters. And if she doesn't," a pause, "then she'll learn the same lesson her father did when he considered backing out of the Jensen merger. The board serves at the pleasure of the shareholders, and CEOs serve at the pleasure of the board." Daniel moved on before they emerged, his suspicions confirmed. This wasn't just about routine cost-cutting. Something deeper was wrong with the TechVision deal, something that had Bennett and Harlow nervous enough to threaten Alexis's position. The morning of the signing arrived with media fanfare. Security was tight, but as a familiar face in maintenance, Daniel slipped through the service entrance unquestioned. He made his way to the executive floor, pushing his cart as he always did. No one looked twice at him. The invisibility of service workers played in his favor now. Through the glass walls of the conference room, he could see reporters setting up, executives adjusting ties and smoothing skirts. Daniel positioned himself by the water cooler, timing his movements precisely. 5 minutes before noon, Alexis Monroe entered, impeccable, in a tailored white suit, her signature copper hair pulled back severely. She looked confident, but Daniel noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted occasionally to Bennett, who hovered nearby like an anxious shadow. Harlow stepped to the podium, delivering opening remarks about historic partnerships and synergistic opportunities. They called the TechVision CEO, a thin man with an artificial smile, spoke next about shared visions and revolutionary technologies. Then it was time. Alexis took her seat at the head of the table. The contract was placed before her, thick with legal language that would destroy thousands of lives with the stroke of a pen. As she lifted her Mont Blanc, Daniel's mind flashed to Ava's face that morning as he dropped her to school. "Be brave today," she'd said, kissing his cheek. She meant her math test, but the words echoed in his head now. Daniel stepped forward into the silence that fell as Alexis raised her pen. "Don't sign that contract," he said, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. The boardroom froze. Cameras clicked rapidly. Security guards moved toward him. Alexis looked up, her eyes widening in recognition. "This deal is based on fraudulent numbers," Daniel continued, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "TechVision is overvalued by at least 30%. Their innovation pipeline is empty. I found their R&D reports in the recycling bin last night." Bennett stepped forward. "This man is a janitor. Security, remove him immediately." But Alexis raised her hand, stopping the guards in their tracks. Her eyes never left Daniel's face. "Everyone out," she commanded, "except him." She nodded toward Daniel. As the room cleared, protests rising from the Tech Vision executives, Daniel stood his ground. 10 seconds had stretched into the most important moment of his life. Whatever came next, even if it cost him everything, he'd found his voice again. And this time, he wouldn't stay silent. "You have exactly 1 minute," Alexis said, her voice low and controlled once they were alone, "to explain why I shouldn't have you arrested for disrupting this meeting." Daniel met her gaze steadily. "Because you already know something's wrong with this deal. I saw your hesitation." He placed the employee roster on the table. 4722 people. Not numbers on a spreadsheet. People with families, medical needs, mortgages. The projections Bennett showed you are manipulated. The cost savings come entirely from gutting the workforce while inflating executive compensation packages. He watched her eyes narrow, calculating. "How would a janitor know that?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Because before I cleaned offices, I analyzed mergers for Goldman Sachs, until I refused to sign off on a deal like this one 3 years ago." Alexis's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. She reached for the employee roster, scanning it quickly. "Even if what you're saying is true, the board has unanimously approved this acquisition. The papers are waiting for my signature." Daniel held her gaze. "The real financial models show Tech Vision is overvalued by at least 30%. Their innovation pipeline is empty. I found their R&D reports in the recycling bin. They're selling you a shell and your board knows it." The color drained from Alexis's face. "That's a serious accusation." Daniel nodded. "One that's worth losing my job over, apparently." A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Alexis pressed the intercom. "Tell everyone the signing is postponed for 24 hours due to a technical matter. No questions." She turned back to Daniel. "My penthouse, 8:00 tonight. Bring whatever evidence you have. If you're wasting my time, I'll make sure you never work in this city again." As security escorted him from the building, Daniel felt the weight of what he'd done settle on his shoulders. He'd likely lost his job regardless of what happened next. On the bus ride home, he called Mrs. Jenkins to ask if she could watch Ava for a few more hours tonight. The elderly woman agreed, though her concerned questions about his early return from work were harder to deflect. At his small apartment, Daniel dug through the storage boxes he'd never fully unpacked, finding his old financial analysis software on a dusty laptop. 3 years had passed, but some skills never left you. By 7:30, he had compiled enough analysis to support his claims. He changed into the only decent clothes he still owned, a white shirt and navy slacks that hung slightly loose on his frame, and headed to the address Alexis had provided. Her penthouse occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown high-rise. The security guard called up, and Daniel was surprised when Alexis herself answered, instructing them to send him up immediately. The elevator ride gave him time to doubt everything. His analysis, his decision, his sanity for confronting one of the most powerful women in Chicago business. When the doors opened directly into her penthouse, he stepped into a space that was simultaneously breathtaking and strangely empty. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, but the minimal furniture and lack of personal touches made it feel more like a hotel suite than a home. Alexis stood by the window, still in her business attire, a glass of amber liquid in her hand. "Right on time," she noted, gesturing toward the dining table where several monitors were set up. "Show me what you have." Without pleasantries, they dove into the numbers. Daniel explained the discrepancies he'd found, the hidden liabilities, the inflated projections. As he walked her through his analysis, he saw her sharp mind at work, questioning, challenging, connecting dots. 2 hours passed in intense discussion, during which Daniel almost forgot the vast gulf that separated their current lives. Almost until his phone rang. "Mrs. Jenkins," her voice worried, "Ava's fever has spiked again." "I have to go," he said, gathering his things hastily. "My daughter's sick." Alexis looked up, the human concern on her face momentarily replacing the CEO mask. "Is it serious?" Daniel hesitated, then admitted, "She has type 1 diabetes. Her blood sugar's been unstable since—" He stopped himself. "I just need to get home." He was halfway to the elevator when Alexis called after him. "Wait, let me drive you." Before he could protest, she had grabbed her keys and coat. The incongruity of the situation hit him as they descended in the elevator, the CEO of Monroe Industries and her janitor, heading to his rundown apartment building in her luxury SUV. The 20-minute drive passed mostly in silence, broken only by Daniel's directions. When they pulled up outside his building, paint-peeling security door, propped open with a brick, Daniel felt a flush of shame he immediately resented. This was his life now, and he refused to apologize for it. "Thank you for the ride," he said formally, moving to exit the vehicle. But Alexis surprised him by turning off the engine and unbuckling her seatbelt. "I'm coming in. If your daughter needs medical attention, I can help." The apartment was small but meticulously organized, the discipline of a single parent evident in every carefully arranged corner. Mrs. Jenkins met them at the door, confusion crossing her face at the sight of the elegantly dressed woman behind Daniel. Her explanation was cut short by Ava's whimper from the bedroom. Daniel rushed to his daughter, finding her flushed and disoriented, her glucose monitor showing dangerously high numbers. "We need to get her to a hospital," he said, the tightness in his chest having nothing to do with his confrontation earlier that day. "I'll call an ambulance," Alexis offered, already reaching for her phone. Daniel shook his head. "The deductible for ambulance transport is $2,000. I'll drive her." He didn't add that his insurance had lapsed the previous month, that this hospital visit would add to his mountain of medical debt. Something in his expression must have communicated these unspoken facts, because Alexis simply said, "I'm taking you both to Northwestern Memorial now." Her tone brooked no argument. Minutes later, they were speeding through the nighttime streets, Ava bundled in a blanket on Daniel's lap. At the hospital, Alexis spoke quietly to the intake nurse, and suddenly they were being ushered into a private room, a team of doctors appearing within minutes. Daniel sat beside his daughter's bed, holding her small hand, while medical staff worked efficiently around them. Alexis remained in the background, a silent sentinel, making calls in hushed tones. Hours passed, and gradually Ava's condition stabilized. As dawn broke, she finally fell into a peaceful sleep. In the quiet of early morning, Daniel and Alexis sat in uncomfortable chairs outside Ava's room, exhaustion etching lines on both their faces. A nurse brought coffee, which they accepted gratefully. "Why did you help us?" Daniel finally asked the question that had burned in his mind all night. Alexis stared into her coffee cup. "Maybe I'm tired of living in a world where decisions are made without seeing the consequences." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Or maybe I just wanted to know how someone goes from Wall Street to pushing a janitor's cart." The invitation to explain hung between them. Daniel hadn't told this story to anyone since arriving in Chicago, had buried it under the daily struggle of survival. But something about the night they just shared, the raw humanity of it, broke through his carefully constructed walls. "I was a rising star at Goldman," he began quietly, "specialized in tech sector mergers. 4 years ago, I was lead analyst on a major acquisition, very similar to your Tech Vision deal. I found irregularities, projected massive layoffs disguised as synergy optimization. When I brought it to my supervisors, they told me to fix the numbers, not the deal." He rubbed his tired eyes. "I refused. Then my wife Laura was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer. Suddenly I had medical bills, a terrified 6-year-old daughter, and a choice to make." Alexis listened intently, her expression unreadable. "I chose my family over my principles." Revised the analysis. The deal went through. Thousands lost their jobs, but I kept mine. The bitterness he'd thought long buried seeped into his voice. "For 6 more months anyway. Then they found a reason to let me go just after Laura died. No severance insurance canceled, reputation destroyed. And yet, knowing the cost, you still spoke up yesterday." Daniel glanced toward Ava's room. "Maybe I needed her to know her father could still do the right thing even when it's hard." The admission felt raw, vulnerable, in a way financial disclosures hadn't. Alexis nodded slowly. "I built my career being tougher, smarter, more ruthless than any man in the room. My father taught me that sentiment is weakness in business." She paused. "But lately I've been wondering what the point of it all is. Empty penthouse, no life outside the office, decisions that look brilliant on paper but keep me awake at night." Morning light spilled through the hospital windows, illuminating the shadows under her eyes. "I never see the Daniel Coles of my decisions," she said quietly. "Until now." By afternoon, Ava was well enough to be discharged. Daniel braced himself for the bill, but was told everything had been taken care of. Outside the hospital, Alexis's driver waited with her car. "I need to get back to the office," she said. "The board is in panic mode over the delayed signing." She handed Daniel a business card with her personal number written on the back. "I want to continue our discussion about Tech Vision. In the meantime, take a few days off to be with Ava. Your job is secure." The professional mask had returned, but something had shifted beneath it. Daniel accepted the card wordlessly, torn between gratitude and pride. As they parted ways, Ava looked back at Alexis. "Will you come visit us again?" she asked with a child's directness. Alexis seemed startled by the question. "I would like that," she answered, a genuine smile softening her features for the first time. The days that followed held an air of suspended reality. Daniel received a call from HR confirming his paid leave. Ava recovered quickly, her resilience constantly amazing him. They spent quiet evenings together, reading and playing board games, carefully not discussing what would happen when he returned to work. Then 5 days after the hospital night, everything shattered. Daniel was preparing dinner when a breaking news alert flashed on his phone. Monroe Industries' acquisition of Tech Vision in jeopardy. CEO questioning deal. Minutes later, his phone rang. Alexis, her voice tight. "They're coming after you. Bennett discovered you accessed company files. There's a police report filed for corporate espionage and data theft. Don't go anywhere. I'm sending my lawyer to you." Before Daniel could fully process this, heavy knocking rattled his apartment door. Two police officers stood outside, warrant in hand. As they led him away in handcuffs, he caught a glimpse of Ava's terrified face as Mrs. Jenkins held her back. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," he called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Call Miss Monroe." The next hours passed in a blur of holding cells and interrogation rooms. Daniel answered questions mechanically, refusing to speak further without legal representation. By nightfall, he sat alone in a sparse interview room, exhaustion and fear fighting for dominance in his mind. What had he been thinking? Challenging people with this kind of power. How would Ava cope if he went to prison? The door opened, and to his shock, Alexis Monroe walked in, followed by a distinguished older man carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Hargrove is the best defense attorney in Chicago," she said without preamble. "You're being released on bail, which has already been posted." Daniel stared at her, disbelief warring with cautious hope. "Why would you do this? Bennett's your CFO. The board is your responsibility." Alexis's expression hardened. "Because they lied to me. After our conversation, I had an independent firm quietly review the Tech Vision financials. Everything you said was true and worse. Bennett and Harlow have been accepting kickbacks to push this deal through." She placed her designer coat around his shoulders as they walked toward the exit, the gesture bizarrely intimate amid the sterile police station surroundings. "The board is trying to force me out now. Tomorrow's emergency shareholder meeting will decide both our fates." Outside, her car waited. "Ava's at my penthouse with my personal assistant. I thought she'd be more comfortable there than with neighbors or emergency care." The thoughtfulness of this action amid all the corporate warfare she was navigating struck Daniel deeply as they drove through nighttime Chicago. Alexis outlined the battle ahead. "They're painting you as a disgruntled ex-finance professional with a vendetta. They've already leaked your Goldman termination to the press." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "And where do you stand in all this?" Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I have to decide by morning whether to sign the deal and keep my position or fight the board and likely lose everything my father built." The question hung unspoken between them. Was principle worth the tea? When they arrived at the penthouse, Ava launched herself into Daniel's arms with a sob of relief. Over her head, he mouthed thank you to Alexis, who nodded once before stepping away to give them privacy. Later, after Ava had fallen asleep in the guest bedroom, Daniel found Alexis on the balcony staring out at the city lights. "I keep thinking about what you said in the hospital," she began without turning around. "About needing your daughter to know you could do the right thing even when it's hard." She finally faced him. "No one has ever seen me make that kind of choice. My father would say, the right choice is whatever protects the company. The board measures right choices in stock prices and quarterly returns." Daniel moved to stand beside her at the railing. "And what do you think?" Alexis's laugh held no humor. "I think I'm terrified of finding out who I am without the title of CEO." Morning came too quickly. Daniel wore a borrowed suit to the shareholder meeting, sitting in the back, while Alexis faced the assembled board and major investors. James Bennett presented his case, first explaining away the misunderstanding with carefully crafted slides showing projected growth and synergies. Richard Harlow spoke of regrettable personnel issues and confidential information breaches, his gaze finding Daniel with barely concealed contempt. Then it was Alexis's turn. She stood straightened her jacket and walked to the podium, carrying only a single sheet of paper. "For 7 years, I've dedicated my life to this company," she began. "In that time, our market value has tripled. Our workforce has grown by 60%, and our reputation for integrity has been my highest priority." She paused, looking directly at Bennett and Harlow. "That integrity is why I cannot in good conscience sign the TechVision acquisition agreement as currently structured. The financial models presented to this board are fundamentally flawed and deliberately misleading. The promised returns rely entirely on workforce decimation and asset stripping, not innovation or growth." She laid out the evidence methodically, her voice gaining strength with each point. When she finished, she placed her single sheet of paper on the podium, her resignation letter. "If this deal proceeds as planned, it will be without my participation or endorsement. I refuse to build success on the broken lives of our employees." The room erupted in chaos as she stepped away from the microphone. Daniel watched her walk through the storm she'd created, head high, shoulders straight. In that moment, something shifted in his chest. Admiration, yes, but something else too. Something he hadn't felt since Laura. Hours later, after votes and counteroffers and heated closed-door discussions, the outcome crystallized. The deal was dead, but so was Alexis's role as CEO. She retained her substantial shareholding and a board seat, but leadership would transition to a successor within 30 days. Daniel, for his part, received no criminal charges, but also no triumphant return to Monroe Industries. As they left the corporate headquarters together that evening, both professionally adrift, Alexis surprised Daniel by laughing a genuine, unburdened sound. "You know what's strange? I feel lighter than I have in years." Daniel understood completely. Freedom often feels that way, even when it comes at a cost. They walked without destination through the early summer evening, two people abruptly untethered from their defined roles in the world. The gulf between them, CEO and janitor, wealthy and struggling, privileged and desperate, seemed less important now. "What will you do?" Daniel asked finally. Alexis considered the question. "I don't know. For the first time in my life, I don't have a 5-year plan." She glanced at him. "What about you?" "Find another job, keep Ava healthy, survive." The familiar pattern of his life since Laura's death. They stopped at a small park where Ava could play within sight while they talked. Watching his daughter on the swings, Daniel felt a strange sense of possibility he hadn't experienced in years. "We could work together," Alexis said suddenly. "Your financial expertise, my connections. There's a market for ethical investment consulting. Companies that want to grow without destroying lives." Daniel looked at her, trying to gauge her seriousness. "You'd partner with a janitor with a ruined reputation." "No," she replied. "I'd partner with a brilliant analyst who had the courage to stand up when no one else would. Someone who reminds me that numbers on spreadsheets are actually people." As the sun set over Chicago, casting golden light across the park, Daniel watched Ava laugh on the swings, her face alight with joy. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future beyond mere survival, a future where he could use his skills for good, where Ava's medical care wouldn't be a constant worry, where doing the right thing didn't always mean losing everything. Beside him, Alexis Monroe, former CEO, current rebel, potential partner, waited for his answer. The woman who had fired thousands with a signature was now offering him a chance to rebuild those lives, including his own. "Daddy, watch me," Ava called, pumping her legs to swing higher. Daniel smiled at his daughter, then turned to Alexis. "I'm in," he said simply. Neither of them could have predicted how this unlikely partnership would transform not just their lives, but the lives of thousands. For now, they were simply two people who had lost everything, only to discover that new beginnings sometimes arrive in the most unexpected moments. Like when a janitor stands up in a boardroom and changes the course of many lives with a single courageous truth. 3 weeks after the fateful shareholder meeting, Daniel sat at a small corner desk in Alexis's downtown office. The space was temporary, 2 rooms in a mid-tier building, nothing like the gleaming Monroe Industries tower. A far cry from the executive suite Alexis had occupied for years, but also worlds away from the janitorial closet that had been Daniel's domain. Phoenix Capital existed only as letterhead and business cards so far. Their mission statement, drafted over late-night takeout and early morning coffee, promised growth without destruction and ethical investment strategies. Noble words. Whether the market would embrace them remained to be seen. Daniel adjusted his tie, a recent purchase that still felt foreign against his throat. His new clothes bought at Alexis's insistence for client meetings hung slightly loose. Years of financial hardship had left their mark on his frame. The Tech Vision stock dropped another 8% yesterday, he said, eyes fixed on his laptop screen. Their quarterly report shows exactly what we predicted. R&D expenditures were inflated by at least $40 million. Alexis looked up from her own computer. Bennett must be sweating bullets. The SEC doesn't take kindly to that level of financial manipulation. Speaking of Bennett, Daniel hesitated. There's a rumor he's being considered for your old position. Alexis's laugh held no humor. Of course he is. The board learned nothing. She closed her laptop and stretched. Any word from our potential investors? 2 more declined. That makes 5 rejections this week. Daniel tried to keep the discouragement from his voice. They're polite about it, but the message is clear. No one wants to back the disgraced CEO and the whistleblower janitor. Former CEO, Alexis corrected automatically, and former janitor. Daniel smiled faintly. Hard to shake the labels once they stick. The transition from their respective positions had been easier for Alexis than for Daniel. Her substantial savings in Monroe Industries shares provided a comfortable cushion. She downsized from her penthouse to a still luxurious condo. Hardly a hardship. Daniel, meanwhile, had been living paycheck to paycheck. The small stipend Alexis insisted on paying him as they launched their venture barely covered rent and Ava's medical expenses. We need a win, Alexis said, standing to refill her coffee. One client who's willing to take a chance on us. Daniel nodded, trying to ignore the growing weight in his chest. He'd gambled everything on this partnership on the belief that his expertise and Alexis's connections could create something meaningful. But 3 weeks in, their prospects seemed increasingly dim. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Jenkins. Ava not feeling well at school. Nurse called. Can you pick her up? Daniel's stomach tightened. I need to go. Ava's sick. Alexis looked up sharply. Her blood sugar? Probably. The nurse called Mrs. Jenkins. He was already gathering his things, calculating the fastest route to Ava's school. Take my car, Alexis said, tossing him her keys. It's faster than the bus. Daniel caught the keys, reflexively surprised by the gesture. I can't. Yes, you can. Go. Call me when you know something. The sleek BMW felt like a spaceship compared to his ancient Honda. Daniel navigated through midday traffic, mind racing with worry. Ava's diabetes had been reasonably stable lately, but stress and schedule changes could trigger fluctuations. The launch of Phoenix Capital had meant long hours for Daniel, less time at home meals at irregular times. At Westridge Elementary, the school nurse met him with a worried frown. Her readings were all over the place today. Started high, then crashed. We gave her juice for the low, but she's still not herself. Ava sat on a vinyl cot, small and pale against the institutional green walls. She brightened slightly when she saw Daniel. Daddy, I tried to be careful. I counted all my carbs at lunch. Daniel knelt beside her, heart aching at her attempt to reassure him. At 9 years old, she shouldered more responsibility than most adults. I know you did, sweetheart. Sometimes it just happens. He checked her glucose monitor, 142 and rising again. Not dangerously high, but the rapid fluctuations were concerning. I'm taking you home, he said, gathering her backpack. We'll watch those numbers together. In the car, Ava ran her hand over the leather dashboard. This is Miss Monroe's car, isn't it? It smells like her perfume. Daniel glanced at his daughter. How do you know what her perfume smells like? From when she took us to the hospital, and when we stayed at her penthouse. Ava trailed her fingers along the window controls. Is she your girlfriend now? Daniel nearly missed a stoplight. What, no, she's my business partner. We're starting a company together. Oh, Ava seemed to consider this. But you like her, right? You smile different when you talk about her. I respect her, Daniel said carefully. She's very smart, and she helped us when we needed it. Mom would like her, Ava said with the simple certainty of a child. She always said you needed someone who could challenge you. Daniel's throat tightened. Laura had indeed said something similar during their last months together when they both knew she was losing her battle with cancer. Make sure you find someone who doesn't let you hide, Daniel. Someone who pulls you out into the light. We'll get your numbers stabilized, he said, changing the subject. Then maybe you can help me with some spreadsheets for work. Ava's face lit up. She loved helping with his financial models, though her assistance mainly consisted of choosing color schemes for the charts. It was their special ritual, a way for her to connect with the work that occupied so much of his time. At their apartment, Daniel settled Ava on the couch with her monitoring kit and a glass of water. He was checking her insulin pump when his phone rang. Alexis. How is she? No preamble, just direct concern. Stabilizing. Blood sugar was swinging pretty wildly, but we're getting it under control. Do you need anything? I can bring food supplies, whatever helps. Daniel glanced at their nearly empty refrigerator. He'd been planning to grocery shop after work. We're fine, thanks for letting me use your car. Daniel. Her tone made it clear she didn't believe him. I'm bringing groceries and dinner. Text me what Ava can eat with her condition. Before he could protest, she'd hung up. Daniel shook his head, a mixture of gratitude and discomfort washing over him. Their relationship had evolved into something he couldn't quite define more than colleagues, not quite friends. The power dynamics constantly shifted. She had the money and connections, he had the family she seemed increasingly drawn to. An hour later, a knock at the door announced Alexis's arrival. She stood in the hallway laden with grocery bags, wearing jeans and a simple blouse instead of her usual business attire. The casual clothes made her look younger, less like the formidable CEO, and more like, what? A friend, a woman in her 30s coming for dinner. I brought options, she said, moving past him into the kitchen. Whole grain, pasta, lean proteins, vegetables. Low glycemic index foods. Daniel watched bemused as she efficiently unpacked the bags. You researched diabetes-friendly foods. Alexis glanced up. Of course. After Ava was hospitalized, I wanted to understand what she's dealing with. She hesitated. I hope that's not overstepping. No, it's thoughtful. Daniel was touched by the gesture, even as part of him bristled at what could be interpreted as charity. Ava appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face brightening when she saw Alexis. Miss Monroe, did you come for dinner? Daddy's not a very good cook. Ava, Daniel protested. Alexis laughed. Well, lucky for both of you, I brought ingredients for a great dinner. Want to help me make it? To Daniel's surprise, Alexis proved quite capable in the kitchen. Not a gourmet chef, but competent with the basics. She involved Ava in simple tasks, patiently explaining each step. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching his daughter giggle at something Alexis said, and felt a confusing mix of emotions. Gratitude, certainly. Attraction, undeniably. And guilt, always guilt, that another woman was stepping into spaces Laura should have occupied. Over dinner, a surprisingly delicious chicken stir-fry with brown rice, Alexis brought up an unexpected topic. I've been thinking about our investor problem. We're approaching this wrong. Daniel raised an eyebrow. How so? We're pitching to traditional venture capital firms, people who backed Monroe Industries and similar corporations. They're never going to fund something that essentially criticizes their entire investment philosophy. She took a sip of water. We need to target ethical investment groups, smaller funds with explicit social responsibility mandates. Those funds have much less capital to deploy, Daniel pointed out, but more alignment with our mission. And we don't need millions to start. We need one success story, one company we can help restructure ethically, one acquisition we can guide that doesn't destroy lives. Her eyes were bright with the challenge. I've compiled a list of potential targets, small to mid-sized companies considering expansions or mergers who might be receptive to our approach. She pulled out her tablet and slid it across the table. Daniel scanned the list, professional interest temporarily overriding his emotional confusion. These are solid prospects, especially Vantage Tech and Mercer Healthcare. I have a contact at Mercer, Alexis said. The CFO worked with Monroe Industries years ago. She might be willing to take a meeting. As they discussed strategy, Daniel felt a familiar energy building the intellectual spark that had drawn him to finance initially before disillusionment set in. Alexis's mind worked differently than his. Where he saw patterns in numbers, she saw relationships between people and institutions. Together, they might actually make this work. Ava, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. You should help companies that make medicine, like my insulin. Both adults turned to her, conversation halted by the simple wisdom of a child. That's actually brilliant, Alexis said after a moment. Healthcare companies face enormous pressure to maximize profit at the expense of patients. We could specialize in helping them find ethical growth strategies. Daniel looked at his daughter with pride. When did you get so smart about business? Ava shrugged. I listen when you and Miss Monroe talk. And I know medicine is really expensive because I hear you on the phone with the insurance people. Daniel winced. He tried to shield Ava from his financial stress, but children absorbed more than adults realized. After dinner, while Daniel helped Ava with her evening insulin routine, Alexis cleaned up the kitchen. The domesticity of the scene struck him as surreal, the former CEO of Monroe Industries washing dishes in his shabby apartment. When Ava was settled in bed with a book, Daniel returned to find Alexis examining the stack of medical bills on his desk. I didn't mean to pry, she said, not looking apologetic. But these costs are unsustainable, Daniel. He stiffened. We manage. Your insurance coverage was inadequate. The out-of-pocket expenses alone. I'm aware of our financial situation. He cut in more sharply than intended. Alexis met his gaze directly. Let me help. Phoenix Capital can provide health benefits. We should set up a proper payroll system anyway, make everything official. We haven't signed a single client yet. We can't afford benefits. I can. The simple statement hung between them, highlighting the vast economic disparity that their professional partnership couldn't erase. Daniel shook his head. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need to handle this myself. Why? Alexis challenged. Because your pride is more important than Ava's health. That's not fair. Neither is watching you struggle when I have the resources to help. She stepped closer. This isn't charity, Daniel. It's an investment in our partnership, in Phoenix Capital. I need you focused on building our business, not drowning in medical debt. Daniel wanted to argue, but exhaustion suddenly overwhelmed him. The constant strain of Ava's condition, the financial tightrope, the uncertain future of their venture, it all crashed down at once. He sank onto the couch, running a hand over his face. I've been handling everything alone since Laura died, he said quietly, making all the decisions, carrying all the responsibility. I don't know how to share that burden. Alexis sat beside him, close but not touching. You don't have to figure it out all at once. Just start with saying yes to health insurance. A small laugh escaped him. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous to refuse. That's because it is. She smiled, the expression softening her usually composed features. Partners help each other, Daniel. That's the whole point. Later, after Alexis had left, Daniel stood in Ava's doorway, watching his daughter sleep. Her diabetes kit sat on the nightstand, a constant reminder of the care she required, the vigilance her condition demanded. What kind of father would refuse better medical coverage out of pride? He pulled out his phone and texted Alexis, yes to the health insurance. Thank you. Her reply came almost immediately. Smart decision. Meeting with Mercer, healthcare tomorrow at 10. Wear the blue tie. Daniel smiled at her characteristic blend of warmth and command. Whatever undefined thing was developing between them, one thing was becoming clear. Alexis Monroe was becoming essential to his life in ways that extended far beyond business. The Mercer healthcare meeting exceeded their expectations. Elaine Winters, the CFO, had indeed worked with Monroe Industries years earlier and held Alexis in high regard. More importantly, she was receptive to their pitch about ethical expansion strategies. We've been considering acquiring a smaller competitor with a promising diabetes management platform, Winters explained. But the cultural integration concerns me. Their research team has an innovative approach we don't want to stifle. Daniel and Alexis exchanged glances. This was exactly the type of situation where traditional acquisition playbooks called for gutting the smaller company's structure and imposing the larger corporation's processes, often destroying the very innovation that made the acquisition valuable. We specialize in maintaining creative integrity through transitions, Alexis said smoothly, maximizing synergies without losing the unique value of either organization. As they outlined their approach, Daniel noticed Winters studying him with particular interest. After the formal presentation, she pulled him aside. You look familiar, Mr. Cole. Have we met before? Daniel tensed. His public confrontation at Monroe Industries had made the business news, but not front-page headlines. Still in financial circles, word traveled. I don't believe so. Were you ever at Goldman about 4 years ago? His stomach dropped. Briefly. Recognition dawned in her eyes. The Jensen merger. You were the analyst who questioned the valuation model. Daniel struggled to maintain his professional demeanor. The Jensen merger, the beginning of his downfall. You have a good memory. I was with Deloitte, then consulting on that deal. Your analysis was correct, by the way. Jensen was overvalued by at least 25%. The acquiring company took a massive write-down 18 months later. She lowered her voice. Many of us respected your position, even if management didn't. Before Daniel could respond, Winters turned to include Alexis in the conversation. Monroe Industries' loss is apparently my gain. I'd like Phoenix Capital to consult on our acquisition strategy. Let's set up a proper engagement next week. Outside the Mercer offices, Alexis could barely contain her excitement. Our first client, and a healthcare company just like Ava suggested. Daniel nodded, still processing his encounter with Winters. She remembered me from the Jensen merger. Is that a problem? Just the opposite. She said I was right. He laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. 4 years of professional exile, and it turns out some people actually respected my stance. Alexis squeezed his arm. Your integrity is our greatest asset, Daniel. That's what Mercer is buying, the assurance that we'll tell them the truth, not just what they want to hear. In the taxi back to their office, Daniel's phone rang. Mrs. Jenkins again. His chest tightened. Daniel, I hate to bother you at work, but the school called again. Ava's numbers are spiking, and she's complaining of headaches. I'm on my way, he said, already signaling the driver to change direction. Alexis didn't ask questions, just nodded when he explained. I'll handle the follow-up with Mercer. Keep me posted about Ava. At the school, Daniel found the situation worse than he'd expected. Ava lay on the nurse's cot, face flushed, breathing rapid. Her glucose monitor showed 342 and rising. It just keeps climbing, the nurse said worriedly. We followed her care plan, but it's not responding normally. Daniel knelt beside his daughter. Hey, sweetheart, not feeling so good, huh? Ava's eyes fluttered open. Daddy, my head really hurts. He checked her pump, no obvious malfunctions. He measured ketones, moderate levels, concerning but not yet critical. Still, the combination of symptoms alarmed him. This wasn't a routine fluctuation. I'm taking her to the endocrinologist, he told the nurse, gathering Ava in his arms. She felt limp and too warm, her small body radiating heat. Dr. Patel's office fit them in immediately, one of the benefits of having a child with a chronic condition. The waiting room was crowded, but they were ushered straight to an exam room. Her insulin pump may be failing, Dr. Patel said after examining Ava. The infusion site looks inflamed, which could mean the insulin isn't being properly absorbed. We'll need to remove it and go back to injections temporarily. Daniel nodded, trying to project calm for Ava's sake. What about her headache and fever? Likely related to the high blood sugar, but we should monitor for infection at the pump site. The doctor's expression was grave. I'd prefer to admit her for observation. Her ketone levels are concerning. Another hospitalization, more medical bills. Daniel pushed the thought aside. Whatever she needs. I'll make the arrangements with Northwestern Memorial, while Dr. Patel stepped out to call the hospital. Daniel texted Alexis with an update. Her response was immediate. On my way to the hospital. Don't worry about anything except Ava. He should have protested, should have assured her he could handle this alone. Instead, he felt only relief. The next hours passed in a blur of medical procedures. Ava's pump was removed, blood samples taken, IV fluids started. Her glucose levels responded gradually to direct insulin injections, but the medical team remained concerned about her overall condition. We'd like to keep her at least overnight, Dr. Patel explained. Possibly longer, depending on how quickly we can stabilize her numbers and identify what caused this episode. Daniel nodded mechanically, exhaustion setting in as the adrenaline of the crisis began to fade. He'd been through this before: the sterile hospital rooms, the beeping monitors, the concerned medical professionals. With Laura during her cancer treatment. With Ava during her initial diagnosis. The hospital environment brought back his most painful memories, his greatest failures. Mr. Cole, a nurse appeared in the doorway. There's an Alexis Monroe here. She says she's family. Before Daniel could correct this assumption, Alexis appeared behind the nurse. She'd changed from her business attire into jeans and a sweater, as if preparing for a long stay. How is she? Alexis asked, moving immediately to Ava's bedside. Stabilizing. They're admitting her overnight. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Her insulin pump malfunctioned. Alexis turned to the nurse. Is Dr. Chen on call? She's the head of pediatric endocrinology here. The nurse looked surprised. I believe she is, but please inform her that Ava Cole has been admitted. Dr. Chen knows me personally. She'll want to be consulted on this case. Daniel stared at Alexis. The commanding CEO had reappeared effortlessly, taking charge of the situation. The nurse nodded and hurried off. You know the head of pediatric endocrinology? Daniel asked. Monroe Industries funded the Diabetes Research Center here. I served on the hospital's fundraising board for years. She shrugged as if leveraging these connections for Ava was the most natural thing in the world. Why wouldn't I use every resource available? Before Daniel could respond, Ava stirred. Miss Monroe, she murmured, eyes fluttering open. Did you come to visit me in the hospital again? Alexis smiled, her expression softening. I sure did. How are you feeling, brave girl? My pump broke. Now I have to do shots again. Ava's face crumpled slightly. I hate shots. I know, but it's temporary, right? And I bet you're really brave about them. Ava nodded, though her lower lip trembled. Daddy says I'm the bravest girl in Chicago. Your daddy is absolutely right about that. As Alexis chatted quietly with Ava, distracting her from the IV in her arm and the monitors attached to her small body, Daniel watched with a mixture of gratitude and unease. Alexis fit so naturally into their lives-filled gaps he hadn't even acknowledged existed. Yet every step closer to her felt like a step away from Laura, from the life they'd planned together. The evening stretched into night. Dr. Chen did indeed appear, conducting a thorough examination and adjusting Ava's treatment plan. We'll have her stabilized by morning, she assured them, and I've already ordered the newest model pump for her. It has better safeguards against this type of malfunction. When Daniel mentioned insurance coverage, Dr. Chen smiled. It's already been handled. He looked at Alexis, who avoided his gaze. More strings pulled, more bills taken care of. The imbalance between them grew. As midnight approached, Ava finally fell into a peaceful sleep, her glucose levels steadily normalizing. Daniel sat in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed while Alexis occupied a similar chair on the opposite side. You should go home, he said quietly. Get some rest. I'll stay with her. Alexis shook her head. I'm fine right here. You have the Mercer follow-up tomorrow. I rescheduled. Ava comes first. The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Ava comes first. When had his daughter's well-being become a priority for Alexis Monroe, former CEO, childless, career woman? Why are you doing all this? Daniel finally asked the question that had been building for weeks. The health insurance, the doctors, staying all night in a hospital. We're business partners, not... He faltered, unsure how to define what they weren't. Alexis was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on Ava's sleeping form. Do you remember what you said to me that first night in the hospital? About wanting Ava to know her father could do the right thing, even when it was hard? Daniel nodded. It made me realize I've never had anyone see me make that kind of choice. She met his eyes across Ava's bed. My entire life, I've been William Monroe's daughter, Monroe Industries' CEO. People have watched me execute strategies, close deals, manage crises, but no one has ever seen me as just Alexis trying to be a decent human being. She reached out to gently adjust Ava's blanket. With you and Ava, I'm not my title or my bank account. I'm just a person who cares, who wants to help. It feels real in a way nothing else has. The vulnerability in her admission caught Daniel off guard. He'd assumed her motivations were complex guilt, perhaps, or some strategic long game. The possibility that she simply cared hadn't seemed plausible for someone from her world. I'm not trying to replace Laura, she added softly, as if reading his thoughts. I know how much you both loved her, how much you still miss her. It's not that, Daniel began, then stopped. It was partly that. It's the imbalance. You have so much to offer money connections influence. I have nothing comparable to give back. Alexis looked genuinely surprised. Are you kidding? You gave me back my integrity, Daniel. You showed me there was more to life than quarterly profits. You and Ava. She hesitated. You made me part of something that matters, a family of sorts. The word family sent a jolt through Daniel. Was that what they were becoming? An unconventional unit formed through crisis and circumstance rather than traditional bonds. Before he could respond, a nurse entered to check Ava's vitals, breaking the moment. By the time they were alone again, the emotional opening had passed, leaving Daniel with more questions than answers about his complex relationship with Alexis Monroe. Morning brought improvement in Ava's condition. Her glucose levels stabilized, her fever reduced, and the pediatric team pronounced her ready for discharge by afternoon. The new insulin pump would be ready in 2 days. Until then, she would manage with injections. I've arranged for a home health nurse to visit daily and help with the transition back to the pump, Dr. Chen informed them, and will want to see Ava for follow-up next week. Daniel knew better than to ask about costs. Alexis had clearly made arrangements, and his protests would only create tension. Instead, he focused on getting Ava home and comfortable. To his surprise, Alexis accompanied them back to the apartment, having arranged for her driver to transport them. In the car, Ava leaned against Alexis's shoulder, still tired from her ordeal, while Daniel sat across from them, watching their easy interaction with conflicted emotions. At the apartment, Alexis moved with surprising efficiency, helping Ava settle on the couch with blankets and books, preparing a simple lunch that met her dietary needs, organizing her medication schedule. She'd done research, Daniel realized. She understood Ava's condition and care requirements almost as well as he did. "You don't have to stay," he said when Ava had fallen asleep after lunch. "You've already done so much." Alexis looked up from her laptop where she'd been quietly working while Ava rested. "Do you want me to leave?" The direct question caught him off guard. Did he, part of him, craved space to process the evolving dynamics between them? Another part had grown accustomed to her presence, her quiet competence, the way she filled gaps in their lives he hadn't known existed. "No," he admitted finally. "I don't want you to leave." Something shifted in her expression, relief perhaps, or a deeper understanding. "Then I'll stay." The afternoon passed peacefully. Daniel caught up on work emails while Alexis continued her quiet productivity. Occasionally they discussed Phoenix Capital business in low voices, but mostly they existed in comfortable silence, broken only by Ava's soft breathing and the gentle tapping of keyboards. Around 4 o'clock, Daniel's phone rang. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but some instinct made him answer. "Daniel Cole," a male voice vaguely familiar. "Speaking." "This is Richard Harlow. We need to talk." Daniel froze. Richard Harlow, chairman of Monroe Industries board, the man who had nearly pressed charges against him for corporate espionage. "I have nothing to say to you." Alexis looked up sharply at his tone, questioning. "I think you'll want to hear this," Harlow continued unperturbed. "It concerns both you and Alexis, and potentially your daughter's welfare." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "Is that a threat?" "Not at all. A situation has developed at Monroe Industries that may interest you. Bennett is pushing through the Tech Vision acquisition again, restructured to avoid the issues you identified. That's not my concern anymore. It should be. The new structure includes acquiring the patent for an artificial pancreas technology that Tech Vision recently purchased, a breakthrough for diabetes management. Daniel's gaze flicked to Ava, still sleeping peacefully. An artificial pancreas, the holy grail for type 1 diabetes patients, a technology that could transform his daughter's life. "What do you want?" he asked, voice low. "A meeting, you and Alexis, today if possible." "Why would we meet with you after everything that happened?" Harlow's voice took on an unexpected note of sincerity. "Because I was wrong. About the Tech Vision deal, about Alexis, about you. And I want to make it right." After ending the call, Daniel relayed the conversation to Alexis. Her expression grew increasingly skeptical. "It's a trap," she said flatly. "Harlow doesn't admit mistakes, and he certainly doesn't try to make things right. He wants something. The artificial pancreas technology, if that's real, it's emotional manipulation. He mentioned Ava specifically to ensure your cooperation." Alexis shook her head. Classic Harlow tactic. Find the pressure point and push. Daniel knew she was probably right, yet the possibility of a technology that could help Ava tugged at him. What if there's more to it? What if he genuinely wants to correct course? Alexis studied him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You want to go?" "I want to hear what he has to say," Daniel corrected, "for Ava's sake. And if it is a trap, then we walk away, no harm done." He met her gaze. "But if there's even a small chance this technology is real and could help Ava?" "Don't I have to explore it?" Alexis's expression softened. Of course you do, but we go together and we stay on high alert. Richard Harlow doesn't do anything without multiple ulterior motives. They arranged for Mrs. Jenkins to stay with Ava while they met Harlow at a neutral location, an upscale restaurant downtown. Daniel felt distinctly out of place among the power suits and designer dresses, but Alexis moved through the space with easy confidence, nodding to several patrons who clearly recognized her. Harlow awaited them in a private dining room, looking much as he had during the shareholder meeting, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, radiating authority. But something was different. A tiredness around his eyes, perhaps. A slight slump to his usually perfect posture. "Thank you for coming," he said, rising to greet them. "Alexis, Ricole." They sat, tension crackling between them. A waiter appeared with water and menus, which Harlow waved away. "Just coffee, please." When they were alone, Harlow leaned forward. "I'll get straight to the point. James Bennett has been manipulating Monroe Industries' financials for years. Not just the Tech Vision deal, multiple acquisitions, revenue projections, cost reports. The SEC has launched an investigation based on anonymous information." Alexis's expression remained neutral. "And this concerns us how? Because when Bennett goes down, and he'll try to take others with him, including both of you." Daniel frowned. "I have nothing to do with Monroe Industries' finances. But you accessed confidential company information, used it to disrupt a major business transaction. In Bennett's narrative, you're an aggrieved ex-employee with a personal vendetta, and Alexis is your co-conspirator." "That's absurd." "Oh," Alexis said, "I was the CEO. I was trying to prevent a fraudulent acquisition. After you were ousted, certain facts came to light that support your position," Harlow admitted. Tech Vision was indeed overvalued, their R&D pipeline largely fictional. You were right, both of you. And the board was misled. The careful phrasing made Daniel snort. "You mean you chose to believe Bennett's lies because they promised bigger profits?" Harlow didn't deny it. "Business decisions are rarely black and white, Mr. Cole. But in this case, the ethical path was also the correct financial one. We should have listened to Alexis." "You still haven't explained why we're here," Alexis said, "or what this has to do with diabetes technology." "Two separate but related matters." Harlow sipped his coffee. "First, I believe we can help each other regarding Bennett. I have information that could protect you from his accusations. In return, I hope you might share what you know about his financial manipulations." "And second," Daniel pressed, "the artificial pancreas technology is real. Tech Vision acquired a small research firm called Neurobiotics 6 months ago, primarily for this patent. Initial clinical trials show promising results, automated insulin delivery with minimal user intervention." Despite his skepticism, Daniel felt a surge of hope. Such a device could transform Ava's life, free her from the constant monitoring and management her condition required. "Bennett plans to shelve the technology after acquisition," Harlow continued. "It's not profitable enough compared to conventional diabetes management products. Recurring revenue from test strips, insulin pumps that need regular replacement, that's where the money is. A permanent solution threatens that business model." Daniel's hope curdled into anger. "They'd bury a life-changing technology for profit. It happens more often than you might think," Alexis said quietly, "especially in medical devices." Harlow nodded. "I may have prioritized profits throughout my career, but even I draw the line at suppressing medical breakthroughs, particularly now." Something in his tone made Daniel look closer. The tiredness he'd noticed earlier, the slight pallor beneath Harlow's tan. "You're ill," he realized aloud. Harlow's smile held no humor. "Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 3 months ago. Ironic, isn't it? The artificial pancreas technology won't help me, but it's given me a new perspective on what matters." The revelation shifted the dynamic in the room. Harlow wasn't just a corporate villain anymore, but a man facing mortality, perhaps seeking redemption. "What exactly are you proposing?" Alexis asked, her voice softer than before. "Help me expose Bennett's manipulation and stop the Tech Vision acquisition in its current form. In return, I'll ensure the artificial pancreas technology is spun off into a separate entity focused on bringing it to market quickly." "And how does this benefit Yuki?" Daniel asked, still wary. "I get to correct a mistake before I leave the board, and perhaps balance the scales a bit before I meet my maker." Harlow's attempt at levity fell flat. "My doctors give me 6 months. I'd like to use that time constructively. The conversation continued for another hour, details emerging about Bennett's schemes and the extent of the financial manipulation at Monroe Industries. By the time they left the restaurant, Daniel and Alexis had a clear picture of both the threat Bennett posed and the opportunity Harlow offered. In the taxi back to Daniel's apartment, they sat in thoughtful silence. "Do you believe in," Daniel finally asked, "about the cancer, about wanting to make things right?" Alexis considered the question. "The cancer, yes. He's lost weight, and there were rumors about his health even before I left. As for making things right," she shrugged, "people facing death often seek redemption. It doesn't mean we should trust him completely. But the technology for Ava is worth exploring." She squeezed his hand briefly. "We'll proceed carefully. Verify everything independently. Keep our guard up. But yes, we'll pursue this, Daniel. For Ava." The simple promise delivered with quiet determination touched Daniel deeply. Once again, Alexis was putting his daughter's needs at the forefront, committing her considerable resources and expertise to a cause that mattered to him. At the apartment, they found Ava awake and playing a board game with Mrs. Jenkins. Her color had improved, and she greeted them with a smile that eased some of Daniel's constant worry. "You look better, sweetheart," he said, kissing the top of her head. "I feel better. Mrs. Jenkins and I had soup and played Monopoly. I'm winning." Mrs. Jenkins chuckled. "She's a natural capitalist, this one. Owns all the blue properties already." Alexis joined them at the table. "Mind if I play too? I'm pretty good at Monopoly." "You can have the red properties," Ava offered generously. "They're not as good as the blue ones, but they're okay." As they played, Daniel watched the easy interaction between his daughter and Alexis, the natural way they developed their own relationship independent of him. Whatever complicated feelings he had about Alexis's role in their lives, one thing was clear. She genuinely cared for Ava, and Ava had grown attached to her. Later, after Ava was in bed and Mrs. Jenkins had gone home, Daniel and Alexis sat at the kitchen table with laptops open, researching neurobiotics and the artificial pancreas technology Harlow had mentioned. "It's legitimate," Alexis confirmed, turning her screen to show Daniel a medical journal article. "Phase 1 in clinical trials completed 6 months ago. Results were promising enough that they fast-tracked to phase 2. Daniel skimmed the technical details, hope building. This could change everything for Ava. No more constant monitoring, no more 3 a.m. blood sugar checks, no more worrying about pump malfunctions. "We need to move quickly," Alexis said. "If Bennett is pushing the acquisition through, we don't have much time to extract this technology." Daniel nodded, determination settling over him. "Whatever it takes. For Ava." "For Ava," Alexis echoed. Their eyes met across the table, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Whatever complicated feelings swirled beneath the surface, whatever undefined relationship was developing, they were united in this purpose, protecting a child they both cared for, fighting against corporate greed that would bury a life-saving technology for profit. In that moment of clarity, Daniel realized something had fundamentally changed. He and Alexis weren't just business partners anymore. They weren't just friends. They had become a team in the truest sense, facing challenges together, leveraging each other's strengths, supporting each other's vulnerabilities. And as they bent their heads together over the research, planning their next moves against Bennett and Monroe Industries, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced since Laura's death, the sense that he wasn't fighting alone anymore, that someone equally capable and committed stood beside him, ready to face whatever came next. For a man who had lost everything and struggled to rebuild from the ashes, it was a revelation both terrifying and exhilarating, because the more Alexis integrated into their lives, the more essential she became, the more he risked if it all fell apart. But looking at the medical research that could transform his daughter's life, a possibility only accessible because of Alexis's connections and determination, Daniel knew he'd already crossed a point of no return. For better or worse, Alexis Monroe had become vital to his and Ava's future. The real question was, what would it cost them to trust her completely? Morning light filtered through the blinds of Daniel's apartment as he reviewed the documents Harlow had provided, spreadsheets, internal emails, meeting minutes, evidence of Bennett's systematic manipulation of Monroe Industries' financial reporting. The scope of the deception was breathtaking. Not just the tech vision deal, but years of acquisitions inflated to boost stock prices and executive bonuses. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes. He'd been up since 4 a.m. analyzing the patterns, connecting dots, building the case against Bennett. His financial analyst skills, dormant for so long, had roared back to life with a vengeance. His phone buzzed with a text from Alexis. On my way, bringing breakfast and coffee, strong coffee. The message brought a smile to his face. These small considerations, food, coffee, remembering Ava's favorite books, had become routine. Alexis slipping seamlessly into their lives, filling gaps Daniel hadn't even acknowledged existed. He checked on Ava, still asleep in her room. The home health nurse had visited yesterday to help with her injections, and her blood sugar had remained stable overnight. In 2 days, she would receive her new insulin pump, a significant improvement over her previous model. Another of Alexis's arrangements. A soft knock announced Alexis's arrival. She entered with a paper bag from the local bakery and a tray of coffee cups. You look like you haven't slept, she said, setting down the breakfast. I haven't much. Daniel gestured to his laptop. Bennett's manipulation goes deeper than we thought. He's been skimming from acquisition funds through shell companies for at least 5 years. Alexis's expression darkened. I suspected something when certain integration costs always ran higher than projections, but I never imagined this level of fraud. Harlow provided transaction records from offshore accounts. Bennett's been moving millions through the Cayman Islands. Daniel shook his head. How did he hide this from you? From the board. Expert compartmentalization. He controlled the due diligence process, managed the integration teams, and reported directly to the board on financial matters. Alexis sipped her coffee. And he had help. Harlow. Not directly, but the board didn't ask the right questions because they liked the results. She examined the documents on Daniel's screen. These transaction patterns are consistent with what we saw at Mercer Healthcare when we uncovered their previous CFO's embezzlement. Daniel nodded. In the months since they'd taken on Mercer as a client, they'd helped the company navigate not just an acquisition, but also the discovery of financial irregularities under their former leadership. Phoenix Capital's reputation was growing ethical business consultants who uncovered uncomfortable truths. What's our next move with Bennett? He asked. We meet with Harlow again today. He's arranged for us to present our findings to 2 board members who are questioning Bennett's latest push on TechVision. Alexis hesitated. There's something else. Bennett has started asking questions about Phoenix Capital, who our clients are, what exactly we're doing. Daniel tensed. How do you know? Sophia, my former assistant at Monroe, still has friends there. She heard Bennett requesting information about us from the legal department, specifically looking for conflicts of interest or non-compete violations. Can he do anything to us legally? I don't think so. My separation agreement was carefully constructed, and you were a maintenance employee without a non-compete clause. She met his gaze directly. But Bennett is dangerous when cornered. And if he realizes we're working with Harlow to expose him, the unspoken threat hung in the air. Bennett had already tried to have Daniel arrested once. With more at stake, who knew how far he might go? Maybe we should back off, Daniel said reluctantly. Focus on building Phoenix Capital. Forget about Bennett and Monroe Industries. Alexis's eyebrows rose. And the artificial pancreas technology for Ava. Daniel sighed. The technology that could transform his daughter's life remained entangled with TechVision, with Bennett, with the whole mess they were trying to navigate. There must be another way to access that innovation. Not without millions in capital to acquire the patents. Alexis's voice softened. I understand your concern, Daniel. This is escalating beyond what either of us anticipated. But we're close to stopping Bennett and securing that technology. I don't think we should give up now. Before Daniel could respond, Ava appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Morning, Daddy. Morning, Miss Monroe. Both adults quickly shifted their demeanor, pushing aside the tension of their discussion. Good morning, sunshine, Daniel said, opening his arms for a hug. How are you feeling? Better. My numbers were good all night. Ava climbed into his lap, eyeing the bakery bag with interest. Are those chocolate croissants? Alexis grinned. Maybe. One for a brave girl who's been taking her medicine so well. As Ava happily devoured her breakfast treat, Daniel and Alexis exchanged a look over her head. The conversation wasn't over, but it would wait. Ava's presence reminded them both of what was ultimately at stake, not corporate politics or professional vindication, but a little girl's future. After breakfast, Mrs. Jenkins arrived to stay with Ava, while Daniel and Alexis headed to their meeting with Harlow. In the elevator down to the lobby, Alexis touched Daniel's arm. "Whatever happens today, we face it together," she said quietly. "That's the whole point of our partnership, remember?" Daniel nodded, drawing strength from her confidence. Whatever complicated feelings swirled between them, and there were many, their professional alliance had proven remarkably effective. Together, they balanced each other's strengths and weaknesses. His analytical precision and her strategic vision, his ethical compass and her pragmatic determination. The meeting was set for a private dining room at the Chicago Club, an old money establishment where Chicago's business elite had networked for generations. Daniel felt distinctly out of place among the oil paintings and mahogany paneling, but Alexis moved through the space with easy familiarity, nodding to several members as they passed. Harlow awaited them along with two Monroe Industries board members. Eleanor Winters, a severe-looking woman in her 60s, who had been with the company since its manufacturing days, and Thomas Chen, a younger tech executive who had joined the board during the company's digital transition. "Alexis, Mr. Cole." Harlow's greeting was formal but not unfriendly. "Thank you for coming. I've briefed Ms. Winters and Mr. Chen on the general situation, but they'd like to hear the details directly from you." Winters' gaze was skeptical. "Richard claims you have evidence of significant financial impropriety by our CFO. That's a serious accusation against a respected executive." "It is," Alexis agreed, "and we wouldn't make it without substantial proof." Daniel opened his laptop and connected it to the room's projection system. For the next 40 minutes, he walked the board members through Bennett's scheme, the shell companies, the inflated acquisition costs, the offshore accounts where the difference had accumulated. "The pattern is consistent across 7 major acquisitions," Daniel concluded. "Approximately 8 to 12% of each transaction value was diverted through this structure. Based on my analysis, the total amount misappropriated exceeds $40 million. A heavy silence fell over the room. Chen looked stunned. Winter's expression had transformed from skepticism to cold anger. "If this is accurate," she said finally, "it represents a profound breach of fiduciary duty." "It's accurate," Daniel assured her. "The transaction records are verified from multiple sources. Bennett's signature appears on all the key documents." "And this connects to the Tech Vision acquisition, how exactly?" Chen asked. Alexis took over. "Tech Vision represents Bennett's largest potential payday yet. The company is overvalued by at least 30% with an essentially fictional R&D pipeline. But one legitimate asset they control is a medical technology firm called Neurobiotics, which has developed a promising artificial pancreas system for diabetes management." She clicked to the next slide showing the clinical trial results Daniel had reviewed. "This technology could transform diabetes care, but according to our information, Bennett plans to shelve it after acquisition because continuous treatment models are more profitable than permanent solutions." "That's unconscionable," Chen said, visibly disturbed. "It's also standard practice in certain sectors of healthcare." Winters replied, her tone neutral. "Ethically questionable, perhaps, but not illegal." Daniel felt a flare of anger. "Maybe not illegal, but certainly not in your shareholders' best interest. That technology has enormous market potential if developed properly." Winters studied him with new interest. "You seem particularly invested in this specific aspect, Mr. Cole." "My daughter has type 1 diabetes. I've seen firsthand how life-changing this technology could be." The personal admission shifted the atmosphere slightly. Even Winters' expression softened a fraction. "What exactly are you proposing?" Chen asked, looking between Harlow and Alexis. "Stop the Tech Vision acquisition in its current form," Alexis said promptly. "Remove Bennett from his position and report his financial misdeeds to the appropriate authorities. And spin off Neurobiotics as a separate entity with a mandate to bring the artificial pancreas technology to market as quickly as possible. You're asking us to upend a $4.2 billion acquisition and remove our CFO based on evidence provided by our former CEO and..." Winters glanced at Daniel. "A former maintenance employee. Former Goldman Sachs analyst," Harlow corrected mildly. "Mr. Cole's financial expertise is legitimate, as is this evidence. I've had it independently verified. Even so, the board would need significant reassurance before taking such drastic action," Winters said. "Bennett has powerful allies among our major shareholders, which is why we need to move quickly and decisively," Harlow pressed. "Bennett has already accelerated the timeline for the Tech Vision acquisition. The final vote is scheduled for next week." Chen looked troubled. That's sooner than I realized. He's rushing it through before these issues can surface, Alexis explained. Once the deal closes, it will be much harder to unwind the damage. The discussion continued for another hour, strategies proposed and debated potential obstacles identified. By the end, both board members seemed convinced of the evidence, if cautious about next steps. We'll need to bring this to the full board, Winter said finally. Carefully with proper legal counsel present, Bennett cannot know we're investigating until we're ready to act. And the neurobiotics technology, Daniel pressed. Chen nodded. I'll advocate for spinning it off as a separate research entity. It's the right move both ethically and financially. As they left the Chicago club, Daniel felt cautiously optimistic. Two board members now supported their position, with Harlow making three. They needed only a majority to stop Bennett. That went better than I expected, he said as they walked to Alexis's car. Winters was the key. Once she saw the financial evidence, her position shifted. Alexis smiled slightly. She's old-school ruthless, but ethical in her own way. She won't tolerate outright fraud. And mentioning Ava didn't hurt, Daniel acknowledged, putting a human face on the technology's importance. It wasn't a tactic, Daniel. It's the truth. Alexis's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It's Sophia, she said, looking at the screen with surprise. She answered, listening intently, her expression growing increasingly alarmed. When she asked urgently, "Are you certain?" "Yes, we'll be careful. Thank you for the warning." She ended the call, face pale. Bennett knows. Someone in the legal department saw our meeting scheduled at the Chicago club and tipped him off. He's called an emergency executive session for this afternoon. Daniel's stomach dropped. To push through tech vision before we can stop him. Worse, Sophia says he's prepared a case against us, claiming we're engaged in corporate espionage and attempting to manipulate Monroe Industries stock for personal gain. That's absurd. We don't even own Monroe stock. I do, Alexis said grimly. A significant amount from my years as CEO. And Bennett has apparently been building a case that Phoenix Capital was created specifically to damage Monroe Industries and profit from the fallout. The accusation was so outlandish that Daniel almost laughed. Who would believe that? It doesn't matter if it's true, only that it creates enough doubt to discredit us while he pushes through tech vision. Alexis started walking faster toward her car. We need to warn Harlow and prepare a response. Ms. Monroe, Mr. Cole. They turned to see a man in a suit approaching rapidly, flanked by two uniformed police officers. Daniel's heart rate spiked. James Bennett has filed a complaint against you both for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and securities manipulation. The man announced, producing a document. I'm serving you with this cease and desist order prohibiting any further communication with Monroe Industries employees or board members. One of the officers stepped forward. We also have a warrant to seize any electronic devices containing Monroe Industries proprietary information. Daniel's mind raced. His laptop contained all the evidence against Bennett, including the files Harlow had provided. If the police took it now, their case would be significantly weakened. This is harassment, Alexis said firmly. We've done nothing illegal. Any information we possess was provided by a current board member as part of a legitimate investigation into financial irregularities. That's for the courts to decide, Ms. Monroe. The man, clearly an attorney, held out his hand. The devices, please. Daniel hesitated, calculating options. Running was pointless. Refusing would only escalate the situation. My laptop is in my bag, he said slowly, reaching for his messenger bag. As he did, he pressed the emergency shutdown button, triggering the encrypted backup protocol he'd set up as a precaution. A copy of all critical files would now be uploading to a secure cloud server. He handed over the laptop, praying the upload had completed. The officer took Alexis's devices as well. You'll receive receipts for these items, the attorney said. I suggest you both retain legal counsel immediately. Mr. Bennett intends to pursue all available remedies for the damage you've caused. As they walked away, Daniel turned to Alexis. This is escalating fast. Bennett's desperate. He knows we have evidence that could destroy him. She glanced at her watch. The backup completed? Daniel nodded. Should have. But without devices, we're limited in what we can do next. Not entirely. Alexis's expression was grim but determined. Bennett thinks he's neutralized us by taking our electronics and blocking communication with the board. But he's forgotten something important. What's that? I was CEO for 7 years. I know where all the bodies are buried. She pulled out a spare phone from her purse, an older model but functional. And I have contacts Bennett doesn't know about. Let's go. They spent the next hours in frenetic activity, working from a small coffee shop using borrowed equipment. Alexis made call after call to former colleagues, industry contacts, financial journalists she'd cultivated over years. Daniel recovered their backup files and organized the evidence into a comprehensive presentation. Bennett's moved the Tech Vision vote to tomorrow morning, Alexis reported after one call. 9 a.m. special session. He's telling the board it's to prevent further disruption from our malicious campaign. That leaves us less than 24 hours to stop him, Daniel said, rubbing his tired eyes. Even with Harlow, Winters, and Chen, we don't have enough board votes yet. We need to go public, Alexis decided. I've contacted Sarah Liang at the Wall Street Journal. She's interested in the story Corporate Fraud Medical Technology Being Suppressed for Profit, former CEO whistleblower. It has all the elements. Daniel hesitated. Going public means burning bridges completely. If we're wrong about any detail, the blowback would be devastating. We're not wrong. Your analysis is solid. Even so, there are risks for both of us. He met her gaze directly, especially for you, your reputation, your standing in the business community. Alexis laughed a short, surprisingly carefree sound. My reputation, Daniel. I walked away from a CEO position on principle. I'm already a pariah in certain circles. Besides, she reached across the table to touch his hand. Some things matter more than corporate standing. The simple declaration, delivered with quiet conviction, reminded Daniel how profoundly Alexis had changed since their first encounter. The ruthless CEO had evolved into someone willing to risk everything for the right cause. Or perhaps that person had always existed beneath the corporate armor, waiting for the right catalyst to emerge. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Mrs. Jenkins, her voice tight with worry. Daniel, you need to come home. 2 men came to the apartment asking for you. They wouldn't identify themselves, but they left a business card from Monroe Industries. They wanted to know when you'd return. Cold fear washed over him. Is Ava okay? She's fine. She was napping. They didn't see her, but Daniel, they didn't seem like ordinary businessmen. Something felt threatening. We'll be right there. Don't open the door for anyone else. He ended the call already standing. Bennett sent people to my apartment, he told Alexis. Looking for me. Her expression hardened. This has gone too far. He's trying to intimidate you through your family. They hurried back to Daniel's building, tension mounting with each minute. In the elevator, Alexis touched his arm. Whatever happens, Ava comes first, she said quietly. If things get too dangerous, you take her somewhere safe. I can handle Bennett. Daniel shook his head. We're in this together, remember? Besides, you're as much a target as I am. The elevator doors opened to reveal Mrs. Jenkins waiting anxiously in the hallway. Thank goodness you're here. They came back about 20 minutes ago, knocked for several minutes. Inside the apartment, Ava was sitting on the couch, looking confused by the adults' concerned expressions. Daddy, why are you home so early? Is something wrong? Daniel forced a smile. Everything's fine, sweetheart. We just needed to check on you. He turned to Mrs. Jenkins. Did the men say anything specific, make any threats? Not directly, but one of them took pictures of your door, the building directory with your name. Said they'd be in touch. She handed Daniel a business card. Monroe Industries Security Division. Alexis examined the card. Internal security wouldn't be investigating this. Bennett's using them as private muscle. Her jaw tightened. We need to move you and Ava somewhere safe until this is resolved. We're a hotel, they'd find us easily. My condo has excellent security. Private elevator, 24-hour doorman. Daniel hesitated. Moving to Alexis's home represented yet another shift in their already complex relationship. But with Ava potentially at risk, his priorities were clear. Okay, we'll pack some essentials. While Daniel helped Ava gather clothes and her diabetes supplies, Alexis made arrangements by phone. Her efficient crisis management was impressive. Within an hour, they had a secure route to her building, temporary security measures in place, and a pediatric endocrinologist on standby in case Ava needed medical attention. As they prepared to leave, Daniel took one last look around the small apartment that had been their sanctuary through difficult years. Despite its shortcomings, it represented stability after the chaos following Laura's death. Leaving even temporarily felt significant. "We'll come back soon," he promised Ava, who was watching him with perceptive eyes. "Are the bad men looking for you because you're trying to help other people with diabetes?" she asked quietly. Daniel knelt to her level, surprised by her insight. "Something like that. Some people don't want the new technology to be available because they make more money from the old ways." Ava considered this. "That's stupid and mean." "Yes, it is," Alexis agreed, joining them, "which is why your daddy and I are trying to stop them." "Like superheroes." Avida's expression brightened. Alexis smiled. "Exactly like superheroes, business superheroes." The simple explanation seemed to satisfy Ava, transforming a frightening situation into an adventure. Daniel marveled at Alexis's intuitive understanding of how to communicate with his daughter, another natural gift he wouldn't have predicted from the corporate executive he'd first encountered. Alexis's condo occupied half a floor in a luxury building overlooking Millennium Park. Unlike her former penthouse, this space felt lived in, with books on shelves, art on walls, even a few framed photographs. Daniel realized he was seeing Alexis's personal taste for the first time, unfiltered by corporate expectations. "Ava, your room is this way," Alexis said, leading them down a hallway. "I hope you like purple." The guest room had clearly been hastily adapted for a child, with colorful throws, pillows, a stuffed animal propped against the pillows, and a small desk with art supplies. Ava's eyes widened with delight. "This is for me. It's so pretty." "Just temporarily," Daniel reminded her, though he was equally touched by Alexis's thoughtfulness. "You two get settled," Alexis said. "I need to make some calls." While Ava explored her new space, Daniel unpacked their essentials. Through the open door, he could hear Alexis's voice in the living room, her tone shifting from professional to urgent to persuasive as she worked her network of contacts, fighting for them for Ava's future with the same determination she'd once applied to corporate acquisitions. When he emerged, she was just ending a call, her expression triumphant. "Sarah Liang is running the story tomorrow morning," as she announced, front page of the Wall Street Journal business section. "Bennett's financial fraud, the artificial pancreas technology, all of it." "That's incredible. How did you convince her so quickly?" "I offered something journalists rarely get: full documentation and on-the-record statements from a former CEO, plus a tip about the SEC investigation that's already quietly underway." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "There's an SEC investigation." "There will be by morning. I have contacts there too." Alexis's smile was reminiscent of her CEO days, confident, slightly predatory. Bennett wanted to play hardball. He forgot who he was dealing with. The evening progressed with an almost surreal domesticity. They ordered dinner, helped Ava with her insulin injection, and established a makeshift command center on Alexis's dining table. As Ava's bedtime approached, she asked for both of them to read her a story, a routine that had developed naturally during Alexis's frequent visits. Sitting on either side of Ava's bed, taking turns reading pages of Harry Potter, Daniel was struck by how familial the scene felt, how right somehow, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. After Ava fell asleep, they returned to the dining room to continue working. Alexis poured them each a glass of wine, a small acknowledgement of the stress they were under. "Harlow texted," she said, checking her spare phone. "He's secured 2 more board votes against Bennett. With Winters and Chen, that makes 5. We need 7 for a majority." "The Journal article might sway the undecided members," Daniel suggested. "Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of a fraud investigation." "That's what I'm counting on." Alexis took a sip of wine. "Bennett's made a critical error. By sending people to your apartment, he's crossed the line from corporate maneuvering to personal intimidation. Even board members who might overlook financial impropriety won't condone threatening an employee's family." Daniel nodded, though a thought had been nagging at him all evening. "There's something I don't understand. Bennett must have known we'd fight back. Why take such an aggressive approach? Why not just deny everything and proceed with the acquisition?" "Because we're not his only problem." Alexis leaned forward. "Think about it. He accelerated the Tech Vision vote. He's trying to intimidate us into silence. He's acting like a man running out of time." "The SEC," Daniel realized. "You think they were already investigating him before we got involved?" "It would explain his desperation." If the TechVision deal closes before any investigation becomes public, he gets his final payout and can potentially disappear before charges are filed. The theory made sense. Bennett's actions were those of someone with everything to lose, taking increasingly risky steps to secure one last victory. As midnight approached, they had done all they could to prepare for the morning's confrontation. The Wall Street Journal article was set to publish at 6 a.m. The Monroe Industries Board would meet at 9 a.m. Between those events, the business world would erupt with questions, accusations, and revelations that would transform the company forever. "We should try to sleep," Alexis suggested, though neither of them looked ready to rest. The tension of impending battle hummed between them. "I'll take the couch," Daniel said, gathering his notes. Alexis hesitated. "The guest room has a pull-out sofa. You'd be closer to Ava." The consideration touched him. Always thinking of Ava first, even in small ways. In the quiet guest room, Daniel checked on his sleeping daughter before preparing the sofa bed. Ava's glucose monitor showed stable readings, a small mercy amid the chaos. He sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the stakes of tomorrow's confrontation. If they succeeded, the artificial pancreas technology might reach the market, transforming Ava's life and the lives of millions with diabetes. If they failed, Bennett would ensure they were discredited, possibly facing legal charges, while the technology disappeared into corporate archives. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Alexis stood in the doorway, changed into silk pajamas, her corporate armor completely shed. "I thought you might want this," she said, offering a glass of water and a small pill. "It's just melatonin, to help you sleep." "Thanks." He took the glass, their fingers brushing briefly. "Big day tomorrow. Biggest since the shareholder meeting." She lingered in the doorway, something unspoken in her expression. "Daniel, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that working with you and knowing you and Ava, it's changed me. For the better." The simple declaration, delivered without her usual confidence, revealed a vulnerability she rarely displayed. Daniel set down the water glass and stood. "Alexis, His words were interrupted by the harsh buzz of his phone. Unknown number calling at 12:30 a.m. His first instinct was to ignore it, but something made him answer. Daniel Cole, a familiar voice, though not one he expected. Richard Harlow, sounding strained. "Bennett knows everything. The board meeting, the Wall Street Journal, all of it. He's called an emergency session for 7 a.m. before the article publishes." Daniel's pulse quickened. "How did he find out?" "My assistant. Bennett got to her somehow. But that's not the worst part." Harlow paused, his breathing audible. "He's moving to liquidate Neurobiotics immediately, sell off the patents, dissolve the company. He has proxy agreements from enough shareholders to force it through without full board approval. He can't do that. The technology, he can and he will unless we stop him. I've called everyone I can reach, but we're still short on votes." Harlow's voice took on an urgency Daniel hadn't heard before. "You and Alexis need to be there, 7 a.m. I'll get you past security." The call ended abruptly. Daniel turned to Alexis, who had clearly overheard. "He's going to destroy the technology," he said, voice hollow. "Out of spite." Alexis's expression hardened into the resolute CEO he'd first encountered. "No, he's not. Get dressed. We're going to Monroe Industries." Now it's after midnight. "Bennett's already there preparing his final moves. We need to be ready." She was already heading for her bedroom. "I'll call Sophia to come stay with Ava." "Alexis, wait." Daniel caught her arm. "This feels wrong. Why would Bennett risk liquidating a valuable asset just to spite us? Even for him, that's extreme." She hesitated, considering. "You're right, it doesn't make business sense. And why would he call an emergency session at 7 a.m. when most board members would struggle to attend on such short notice? Because he doesn't want a full board present," Alexis realized. "Just enough allies to push through whatever he's planning." Daniel's analyst mind raced through scenarios. What if Neurobiotics isn't being liquidated? What if it's being separated from TechVision for a different reason? Alexis's eyes widened with sudden understanding. Bennett's extracting the valuable parts before the acquisition, creating a separate entity he controls, then selling the hollow shell of TechVision to Monroe Industries. It would explain everything, the rushed timeline, the aggressive tactics, the desperate measures. Daniel's pulse quickened. "We need to find proof before the 7 a.m. meeting." They dressed quickly, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. Sophia arrived within 30 minutes, sleepy but reliable, promising to monitor Ava's condition carefully. The night streets of Chicago were eerily quiet as they drove to Monroe Industries headquarters. The massive glass tower stood illuminated against the dark sky, a few lights visible on the executive floors, evidence of the late-night machinations taking place. "How do we get in?" Daniel asked as they approached. "Security won't just wave us through, especially after Bennett's complaints." "We don't go through the front door." Alexis drove past the main entrance to a service alley behind the building. "There's a loading dock with keycard access. My credentials were never fully deactivated, and oversight in IT that I never bothered to mention." Her inside knowledge of the building's security vulnerabilities proved accurate. Within minutes, they had entered through the service entrance and were ascending in a freight elevator. "We need to access Bennett's files," Alexis said, her voice low. "His office computer will have the neurobiotics transaction documents. His office will be locked, possibly alarmed." "Yes, but his assistants won't be. And she has access to most of his digital files for routine processing." The executive floor was dimly lit with only security lighting illuminating the hallways. They moved silently, years of corporate experience, guiding Alexis months of janitorial work, making Daniel equally familiar with the layout. Bennett's assistant's desk sat in an alcove outside his office. The computer was locked, but Alexis knew the administrative override, another remnant of her CEO days. "Search for neurobiotics," she instructed as Daniel navigated the file system. "Recent transactions, legal documents, anything related to patent transfers." Daniel worked methodically, his financial analyst skills returning fully as he sifted through digital records. "Here, a draft agreement for patent transfer. Neurobiotics, artificial pancreas technology being sold to GBH Holdings. I've never heard of them. Shell company. Almost certainly." Daniel opened another document. "Look at this: incorporation papers filed 3 weeks ago, registered in Delaware. Principal owner listed as a trust in the Cayman Islands. Bennett's hiding his ownership behind layers of legal entities." Alexis studied the screen. "Transfer price is $90 million, well below market value for breakthrough medical technology. The real payoff comes later when he licenses or sells it to a major pharmaceutical company." Daniel continued searching. "There's more. Emails between Bennett and someone named Marcus Vega at Tech Vision. They're coordinating the whole scheme. Vega is their chief strategy officer. I met him during the initial acquisition talks." Alexis leaned closer to read. "They've been planning this for months, extract the valuable patents before selling the company to Monroe Industries." "It's fraud on multiple levels," Daniel said, downloading copies of the documents to a USB drive. "Securities fraud against Monroe's shareholders, breach of fiduciary duty by Bennett, tax evasion through the offshore structures. And they're executing the final steps tonight." Alexis pointed to a calendar entry. "Patent transfer scheduled for 6 a.m., 1 hour before the emergency board meeting." They had found the proof, clear evidence of Bennett's scheme to defraud Monroe Industries while personally profiting from the artificial pancreas technology. But knowing the plan didn't mean they could stop it. "We need to get these documents to the board members," Daniel said, pocketing the USB drive. "Harlow, Winters, Chen, and the others Harlow convinced." "That still leaves us 1 vote short of a majority," Alexis reminded him. "And Bennett has proxy agreements that may override normal voting procedures for asset dispositions." Daniel was about to respond when a noise from the hallway froze them both. Footsteps approaching steadily. Without speaking, they quickly shut down the computer and moved toward a supply closet, the nearest hiding place. Inside the dark closet, they stood pressed together, hardly daring to breathe as the footsteps passed, then stopped, returned. The door handle turned. Light flooded the small space, revealing James Bennett standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 security guards. His expression shifted from surprise to smug satisfaction. "Breaking and entering unauthorized computer access, theft of confidential information." Bennett shook his head in mock disappointment. "You're accumulating quite a list of charges, Ms. Monroe. And Mr. Cole." Daniel's hand closed protectively around the USB drive in his pocket. "Their evidence, their only leverage." "We know about GBH Holdings," Alexis said, her voice steady despite their compromised position. "About the patent transfer, the offshore accounts, all of it." "Accusations without proof," Bennett dismissed, "from disgruntled former employees trespassing on private property." He nodded to the security guards. "Detain them in the conference room until the police arrive." As the guards escorted them down the hallway, Daniel's mind raced for options. The USB drive contained their evidence, but without access to the board members, it was useless. By the time any legal process played out, the patents would be transferred, the technology lost. The conference room, ironically the same one where Daniel had first confronted Alexis about the Tech Vision deal, felt like a prison cell despite its elegant furnishings. One guard remained inside with them, while the other stood watch outside. "The police will be here within 20 minutes, Bennett informed them with evident satisfaction. "I suggest you use that time to consider your legal position. Corporate espionage carries significant penalties." After he left, Alexis and Daniel sat in forced silence, the guard watching them intently. Minutes ticked by, precious time lost as Bennett's plan progressed toward completion. Then, unexpectedly, the guard's radio crackled. "Security to executive lobby. Visitor requiring escort." The guard hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave his post. "Go," a new voice said from the doorway. Richard Harlow stood there looking more haggard than ever, but emanating authority. "I'll watch the prisoners." The guard nodded respectfully. Harlow was still board chairman after all, and departed quickly. "You two have a talent for dramatic timing," Harlow said, closing the door behind him. "Breaking into corporate headquarters in the middle of the night." "We have proof of Bennett's scheme," Daniel said, retrieving the USB drive. "He's transferring the neurobiotics patents to a shell company he controls, then selling the worthless remains of Tech Vision to Monroe Industries." Harlow examined the drive. "This changes everything. The board won't stand for such blatant fraud." "We're still one vote short," Alexis reminded him, "and Bennett claims to have proxy agreements for special asset dispositions." About that, Harlow's expression shifted to something Daniel couldn't quite interpret. "There's something you should know, something I haven't been entirely forthcoming about." A chill ran down Daniel's spine. Something in Harlow's tone warned of complications beyond what they'd anticipated. "The artificial pancreas technology," Harlow continued, "its significance goes beyond business considerations for me. My granddaughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes last year. She's 7. The revelation landed with unexpected impact. Harlow's interest in the technology wasn't just about his cancer diagnosis or corporate redemption. It was personal, family-driven, like Daniel's own motivation. "Why didn't you tell us?" Alexis asked softly. "Because my motives needed to appear purely professional. The board respects business judgment, not emotional investment." Harlow's voice hardened. "But I will not allow Bennett to bury technology that could transform my granddaughter's life. No matter what it takes." A sudden commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. The door burst open to reveal Bennett, face flushed with anger. "What is this?" he demanded, brandishing a tablet. On the screen, a Wall Street Journal article blazed the headline, "Monroe Industries CFO implicated in massive financial fraud." "Impossible," Alexis breathed. The article wasn't scheduled to publish until 6 a.m. "Sarah Liang moved up the timeline," Harlow said calmly, "at my request, along with sending advance copies to every Monroe Industries board member." Bennett's face contorted with rage. "You orchestrated this after everything we've built together." "What you built was a house of cards, James. I simply provided the gust of wind." Harlow turned to a figure in the doorway, Eleanor Winters, accompanied by 3 other board members. "Perfect timing. I believe we now have sufficient votes for an emergency action." The next hour unfolded in a blur of corporate procedure accusations and revelations. Bennett alternately threatened and pleaded as the evidence mounted against him. The neurobiotics patent transfer was halted with minutes to spare. Security escorted Bennett from the building as dawn broke over Chicago, illuminating the dramatic boardroom confrontation. By 8 a.m., the emergency session had concluded with decisive action. Bennett's termination, the Tech Vision acquisition restructured to focus on neurobiotics, while discarding the overvalued remainder, in a full investigation into all financial irregularities. As board members dispersed to manage the public relations crisis now unfolding, Daniel, Alexis, and Harlow remained in the conference room exhausted but triumphant. "The neurobiotics technology will be developed under a special division," Harlow confirmed, "with accelerated clinical trials and a mandate to bring it to market as quickly as possible." "And Phoenix Capital?" Alexis asked. "Our role going forward?" "The board would like to retain your services to help untangle the financial mess Bennett created." Harlow smiled slightly. They were quite impressed by your investigative skills, even if your methods were somewhat unorthodox. Daniel could hardly process their victory through his exhaustion. They had secured the artificial pancreas technology, exposed Bennett's fraud, and potentially established Phoenix Capital as a legitimate player in the business consulting world, all in one chaotic night. There's one more thing, Harlow said, his expression growing serious. The technology development will require specialized oversight, someone who understands both the business implications and the human impact. He looked directly at Daniel. The board would like to offer you a position leading the neurobiotics division. Your financial expertise combined with your personal understanding of diabetes management makes you uniquely qualified. The offer stunned Daniel into silence. A leadership role at Monroe Industries focusing specifically on technology that could transform Ava's life. It was more than he could have imagined when he'd stood up in that boardroom months ago. What about Phoenix Capital? He finally asked, looking at Alexis. That's entirely up to you, she replied, her expression carefully neutral. This is an extraordinary opportunity, Daniel, one that aligns perfectly with your skills and personal priorities. Her support was genuine, but tinged with something else, resignation perhaps, the unspoken acknowledgement that their paths might diverge here, their unlikely partnership concluding with this victory. I need time to think about it, Daniel said, and to talk with Ava. This affects her too. Harlow nodded understanding. Of course, but don't wait too long. The board meets again in 3 days to finalize these arrangements. As they finally left Monroe Industries, the morning sun fully risen over Chicago, Daniel felt the weight of decisions yet to be made. The professional opportunity of a lifetime balanced against the partnership he'd built with Alexis. The chance to transform diabetes care for millions, including his daughter, versus the uncertain future of Phoenix Capital. They rode in silence back to Alexis's condo, both too exhausted for the conversation that inevitably awaited them. In the elevator up to her floor, Alexis finally spoke. You should take the position, she said quietly. It's perfect for you and for Ava. What about us? The question slipped out before Daniel could censor it. Our partnership, Phoenix Capital. Alexis's smile held a hint of sadness. Some partnerships are meant to accomplish specific goals, Daniel. Perhaps ours has fulfilled its purpose. The elevator doors opened before he could respond. Inside the condo, they found Sophia and Ava at the breakfast table, the little girl happily explaining the intricacies of carb counting to an attentive audience. Daddy, Miss Monroe, Ava's face lit up. You're back. Did you beat the bad guys? Despite his exhaustion, Daniel smiled. We did, sweetheart. And guess what? That special medicine we talked about, the one that could help kids like you, it's going to be made after all. Ava's eyes widened. Really? So I won't need shots anymore. Not right away. It takes time to make new medicine safe. But someday, yes. As Ava processed this news, her expression serious beyond her years, Daniel felt the full impact of what they'd accomplished. Not just corporate justice or professional vindication, but real hope for his daughter's future. A medical breakthrough that might free her from the constant burden of diabetes management. He glanced at Alexis, who watched them with undisguised affection. Whatever came next, whether he accepted Harlow's offer or found another path forward, this moment of shared triumph belonged to both of them. They had faced Bennett together, risked everything together, and succeeded together. The rest, their professional future, their personal relationship, the complicated feelings neither had fully acknowledged, would have to wait for another day. For now, it was enough to savor the victory and the promise it held for Ava's future. Breakfast, Alexis suggested, moving toward the kitchen with familiar ease. I think we've earned it. As they settled into this small moment of domestic tranquility, the bigger decisions temporarily set aside, Daniel realized something important. Whatever title he held, whatever company employed him, the foundation they'd built these past months wouldn't easily crumble. Alexis had become essential to his and Ava's lives in ways that transcended business arrangements. And somehow, against all odds, they had become equally essential to her. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Monroe Industries' executive conference room, casting long shadows across the polished table where Daniel sat reviewing final documents. 3 days had passed since their dramatic night confrontation with Bennett. 3 days of legal statements, board meetings, and life-changing decisions. He adjusted his tie, still an unfamiliar sensation after years in janitorial uniforms and casual clothes. The crisp suit he wore had been delivered that morning, courtesy of Monroe Industries' executive wardrobe service. Another surreal reminder of how drastically his circumstances had changed. "The compensation package is more than generous," said Monroe Industries' legal counsel, sliding another document toward him. "Full medical coverage for both you and your daughter, including all experimental treatments related to diabetes management. Stock options vesting over 5 years. And of course, direct oversight of the neurobiotics division with significant autonomy." Daniel nodded, still processing the magnitude of the offer. Leadership of the division developing the artificial pancreas technology, a 7-figure salary. Benefits that would ensure Ava received the best medical care available. It was everything he could want professionally and for his daughter's health. "So why did making the decision feel so complicated, Mr. Cole?" the lawyer prompted. "Do you need more time to consider?" "No," Daniel said, reaching for the pen. "I've made my decision." His signature on the contract felt both momentous and anticlimactic. A simple scrawl of ink that redirected his professional trajectory yet again from Wall Street analyst to janitor to division head in one of Chicago's largest corporations. Life's strange, unpredictable path. "The board is pleased you've accepted," Richard Harlow said, entering the room as the lawyers gathered their documents. His illness was more visible now, the weight loss and pallor impossible to disguise, yet he carried himself with the same distinguished bearing. "Especially given your other opportunities." Daniel knew he referred to Phoenix Capital, the ethical investment firm he and Alexis had barely launched before events overtook them. "It was the right decision for Ava," he said simply. "And for millions of others with diabetes," Harlow added, "including my granddaughter." He dismissed the lawyers with a nod, waiting until they left before continuing. "Have you spoken with Alexis?" "Not since yesterday." Daniel's tone was carefully neutral. "She's been busy with the SEC investigation." The aftermath of Bennett's fraud had thrust Alexis into the spotlight as a corporate whistleblower. Her testimony was crucial to the government's case, her insider knowledge of Monroe Industries operations, invaluable to investigators untangling years of financial manipulation. "She's an extraordinary woman," Harlow observed, studying Daniel with shrewd eyes. "Not many CEOs would risk everything on principle. Fewer still would partner with a janitor to expose corporate fraud." "Former janitor," Daniel corrected, automatically echoing Alexis's usual response. Harlow smiled slightly. "Indeed, just as she's the former CEO. Both of you defined by what you were not, what you are becoming." The philosophical observation hung in the air between them. What was Daniel becoming? Division head, certainly. Single father always. But beyond professional titles and family roles, who was he evolving into through these extraordinary experiences? And Alexis, what was she becoming now that their shared mission had concluded? "The press conference is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Harlow continued, changing the subject. "The board would like you present when we announce the Neurobiotics Initiative. Your personal connection to diabetes care makes for a compelling narrative." Daniel nodded. Public relations, another aspect of executive life he'd need to reacclimatize to after years of invisibility. "I'll be there." "Excellent. Oh, and Daniel," Harlow paused at the door. "The private equity offer Alexis received for Phoenix Capital, it's quite substantial. She's built something valuable even in these few months. Something that could thrive with proper investment." The information was news to Daniel. "She didn't mention any offers." "Perhaps she didn't want to influence your decision." Harlow's expression was unreadable. "7 million, I believe, for her stake in a company that hasn't yet turned a profit." Remarkable vote of confidence. After Harlow left, Daniel sat alone in the conference room, turning this new information over in his mind. Alexis had received a significant offer for Phoenix Capital, but hadn't told him. Was she protecting him, as Harlow suggested? Or had she already decided to move forward without him accepting that their paths were diverging? The questions followed him as he left Monroe Industries headquarters and headed to pick up Ava from school. They'd been staying in Alexis's condo for the past 3 days, a temporary arrangement, while security verified that Bennett's associates no longer posed any threat. Tonight would be their last night there before returning to their own apartment. Another transition, another ending of sorts. At Westridge Elementary, Daniel found Ava waiting with her teacher diabetes kit in hand, chatting animatedly about the day's science lesson. Daddy, we learned about pancreases today. I told everyone mine doesn't work right, but someday there might be a robot one that could help me. Daniel smiled, heart swelling with renewed appreciation for his daughter's resilience. That's right, sweetheart. And guess what? Daddy's going to be working with the scientists who are building that robot pancreas. Ava's eyes widened. Really, you'll help make it? I'll be in charge of the whole team. Her reaction, pure joy mixed with pride, confirmed he'd made the right decision, whatever complications it created with Alexis. Ava's well-being had to come first. Always. In the car, Ava peppered him with questions about his new job, about when the artificial pancreas would be ready, about whether she could visit his office and meet the scientists. Her excitement was infectious, momentarily displacing his uncertainty about the future. At Alexis's condo, they found her in the kitchen, preparing dinner with surprising domesticity. These past days had revealed unexpected sides of her, not just her corporate strategist brilliance or crisis management skills, but smaller, more intimate qualities. Her surprising patience with Ava's endless questions, her quiet determination to master diabetes-friendly cooking, the occasional flash of vulnerability when she thought no one was watching. Something smells amazing, Daniel said, setting down his briefcase. Alexis looked up, her smile genuine, but tinged with something he couldn't quite identify. Herb roasted chicken with quinoa and vegetables, perfectly balanced for stable blood sugar. She turned to Ava. How was school, brave girl? We learned about pancreases, and Daddy told me he's going to help make robot ones. Alexis's gaze flicked to Daniel, understanding dawning. You accepted the position. He nodded. This afternoon. Congratulations. Her tone was warm, sincere. It's the perfect role for you. Before he could respond, Ava tugged at his hand. Can I watch TV while you two talk about boring grown-up stuff? Daniel laughed, grateful for his daughter's perceptiveness. 20 minutes, then homework. When Ava had settled in the living room, Alexis returned to preparing dinner, her movements precise and controlled. When do you start? Monday. There's a press conference tomorrow morning announcing the Neurobiotics Initiative. Daniel leaned against the counter. Harlow mentioned you received an offer for Phoenix Capital. Her hands stilled briefly. He shouldn't have told you that. Why didn't you? Alexis sighed, setting down the knife she'd been using. Because it wasn't relevant to your decision. The neurobiotics position is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you, Daniel. It combines your financial expertise with something deeply personal. I didn't want considerations about Phoenix Capital to complicate that. It's our company. We built it together. And it served its purpose. We stopped Bennett, secured the artificial pancreas technology, and established our professional credibility. She resumed chopping vegetables, not meeting his eyes. Sometimes partnerships have natural endpoints. The echo of her words from days earlier struck Daniel. Was that how she viewed their relationship, a temporary alliance with a predetermined conclusion? What about the private equity offer, he asked. $7 million is significant. I haven't accepted yet. There are details to negotiate. But you plan to accept. Alexis finally looked up, her expression carefully composed. It makes sense, Daniel. Phoenix Capital needs leadership and capital to grow. I can provide one but not the other. The private equity group offers both. The practical logic was undeniable, yet Daniel felt a sense of loss he couldn't articulate. Their partnership, professional and personal, had become central to his life in ways he hadn't fully acknowledged until now. And us, he asked, the question hanging between them. Where does that leave us? Alexis's composure faltered slightly. That depends on what us means, doesn't it? We've never really defined it. The conversation was interrupted by Ava returning to the kitchen, homework in hand, blissfully unaware of the tension between the adults. Dinner proceeded with surface normality, discussions of Ava's school projects, Daniel's new position, plans for returning to their apartment the next day. Only after Ava was in bed did they resume their conversation, sitting in Alexis's living room with glasses of wine, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. I need to know what you want, Daniel, Alexis said, finally breaking the silence. Because I've been operating on assumptions and I'm not sure they're correct. Daniel considered the question carefully. What did he want? The answer had seemed simple weeks ago, security for Ava's stable employment, perhaps the chance to rebuild his professional reputation. But now, I want Ava to have the best possible care, he began. The neurobiotics position offers that. I understand, her well-being comes first. But that's not all. He set down his wine glass, choosing his words with care. These past months with you building Phoenix Capital, fighting Bennett, even just sharing meals and reading to Ava, they've become important to me. To us. Alexis's expression softened. They've become important to me too, more than I expected. Then why are you so quick to define an endpoint, to accept that our paths are diverging? Because I've learned to recognize when I'm wanted for what I can provide rather than who I am. A hint of old pain colored her words. My father valued me for continuing his legacy. Monroe Industries valued me for quarterly results. I've spent my life being useful, Daniel. It becomes habit to assume that's all people want. The admission stunned him, this glimpse of insecurity from a woman who projected such confidence. Is that what you think, that I value you for your connections, your resources, your help with Ava? Don't you, at least in part? She held his gaze steadily. Be honest, Daniel. When we first started working together, wasn't that a significant factor? He couldn't deny it. Initially, yes, you offered security for Ava, professional opportunity for me. Things I desperately needed. She nodded, the confirmation seemingly expected. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's human to seek what we need. But it's evolved beyond that, Daniel insisted. You must know that. Into what exactly, Pam? The directness of her question demanded equal honesty. Daniel took a deep breath. Into something I don't have a simple label for. Partnership, certainly. Friendship, definitely. And potentially more, if circumstances were different. If I weren't the wealthy former CEO and you weren't the struggling single father, if our lives weren't so fundamentally imbalanced. Yes, the admission felt both liberating and painful. The inequality complicates everything. Your ability to solve problems with money or connections, Ava's medical care, professional opportunities, even basic security. It creates a dynamic that's difficult to navigate. Alexis considered this, twirling her wine glass thoughtfully. What if that imbalance were reduced, if you had financial security, professional standing, and resources of your own? Like my new position at Monroe Industries. Exactly. Division head is a significant role, Daniel, with compensation to match. Understanding dawned. Is that why you didn't fight harder for Phoenix Capital? Why you encouraged me to take the neurobiotics position to create more equality between us? Alexis's smile was tinged with irony. Not consciously, but perhaps subconsciously, I recognized that our relationship couldn't evolve while the power dynamic remained so uneven. The insight resonated with Daniel's own unacknowledged feelings. His discomfort with Alexis paying for Ava's medical care, his hesitation to move into her condo, even temporarily, his complicated reaction to her financial support, all stemmed from the fundamental imbalance between them. So where does that leave us now, he asked. I've accepted the neurobiotics position. You're considering the private equity offer for Phoenix Capital. Our professional paths are diverging. But our personal paths don't have to, Alexis said quietly, unless you want them to. The simple statement opened possibilities Daniel had been afraid to consciously consider. A relationship with Alexis beyond their professional alliance. A future where she remained part of his and Ava's lives, not as a benefactor or business partner, but as something more intimate and equal. I don't want our paths to diverge, he admitted, but I'm not sure how to navigate this transition. One day at a time, Alexis suggested, without preconceived endpoints or definitions, just seeing where it leads. The proposal was both terrifying and exhilarating. Open-ended, undefined, potentially messy, everything the structured, analytical part of Daniel typically avoided, yet also honest, organic, and full of possibility. I'd like that, he said finally. The relief in Alexis's smile told him she'd been harboring the same fears, the same hopes. For all her outward confidence, she'd been equally uncertain about their future. Their conversation continued into the night, ranging from practical matters, Daniel's new role, Alexis's plans for Phoenix Capital arrangements for Ava's care, to deeper, more personal revelations. Shared histories, hopes, regrets. The gradual dismantling of remaining barriers between them. By the time they finally retired to their separate rooms, something fundamental had shifted. Not resolved entirely, but acknowledged. Named. Given space to develop at its own pace. Morning arrived with renewed purpose. Daniel helped Ava prepare for school, their routine comfortable despite the temporary surroundings. Alexis joined them for breakfast, her interactions with Ava natural and affectionate. "Will you come see our apartment when we move back tonight?" Ava asked Alexis as she gathered her school things. "If you'd like me to," Alexis replied, looking to Daniel for confirmation. "We both would," he assured her. "Maybe you could stay for dinner. I can't promise it will be as good as yours, but I'd love that." The simplicity of her acceptance belied the significance of the invitation, their first deliberate step toward whatever future they were building. After Ava left for school, Daniel and Alexis prepared for their respective days, he for the press conference, announcing the Neurobiotics Initiative, she for another meeting with SEC investigators about Bennett's fraud. "Nervous about the press conference?" Alexis asked, straightening his tie with practiced ease. "A little. It's been years since I've faced reporters." "You'll be excellent. Just be honest about why the technology matters to you. Personal stories resonate more than corporate talking points." Her hands lingered briefly on his shoulders. "Speaking from experience?" The moment of casual intimacy felt natural, a small indication of evolving boundaries between them. The Monroe Industries press conference exceeded expectations. With Harlow's guidance, Daniel presented the Neurobiotics Initiative not just as a corporate venture, but as a personal mission, his commitment as a father to advancing technology that could transform his daughter's life and the lives of millions with diabetes. Reporters responded enthusiastically to the human angle, particularly when Daniel referenced his journey from financial analyst to janitor to division head. "Sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from seeing a company at every level," he told them. "From the boardroom to the maintenance closet and back again." The quote made headlines along with Monroe Industries' commitment to accelerating the artificial pancreas technology. By afternoon, the company's stock had risen 5%, and Daniel had received congratulatory messages from former colleagues who'd long since written him off professionally. Redemption of a sort, though Daniel found he cared less about external validation than he once had. His priorities had shifted. Ava's well-being, the diabetes technology's development, and his evolving relationship with Alexis now occupied the center of his concerns. That evening, they moved Ava's essential belongings back to their apartment. The familiar space felt simultaneously comforting and somehow smaller after their stay in Alexis's luxurious condo. Yet it was home, the place where he and Ava had rebuilt their lives after Laura's death. Alexis arrived for dinner carrying groceries and a small housewarming gift for Ava, a terrarium kit for growing herbs. "For your science project," she explained, as Ava unwrapped it excitedly, "and maybe someday for cooking together." The thoughtfulness of the gift, practical yet encouraging Ava's interests, typified Alexis's approach to his daughter, never attempting to replace Laura, but creating her own unique relationship with Ava. Dinner was simple but comfortable, the three of them falling into easy conversation. Afterward, they helped Ava set up her terrarium, the domestic activity feeling both novel and natural. When bedtime arrived, Ava asked if both adults would read to her, a routine established during their stay at Alexis's condo. "Of course, sweetheart," Daniel assured her, exchanging a glance with Alexis. Sitting on either side of Ava's bed, taking turns reading pages of her current favorite book, Daniel was struck by how familial the scene felt. Not a replacement for what he'd lost with Laura, but something new and valuable in its own right. After Ava fell asleep, they retreated to the living room, the apartment quiet around them. "Thank you for dinner," Alexis said, settling beside him on the couch, "and for including me in Ava's bedtime routine. It means a lot." "She adores you," Daniel said simply, "and so do I." The admission, as straightforward, unembellished, hung between them. Alexis's expression softened, a vulnerability few ever witnessed crossing her features. Even with all the complications, the professional transitions, the economic disparities, the undefined future, Daniel smiled. "Especially with all the complications, they're part of our story." "Our story," she repeated, testing the phrase. "I like that." The moment stretched between them, laden with possibility. Then, with the same courage that had driven her to reject the Tech Vision deal months ago, Alexis leaned forward and kissed him. The connection was brief but profound acknowledgement of feelings that had been building through their extraordinary journey together. When they separated, Daniel saw his own mixture of wonder and certainty reflected in her eyes. Stay, he said softly, not just tonight, but in our lives. However it evolves, whatever form it takes. I'd like that, Alexis replied, echoing his response from the previous night. Very much. Their future remained undefined, full of transitions and adjustments. Daniel would begin his role at Monroe Industries, overseeing the technology that might transform Ava's life. Alexis would likely accept the private equity offer for Phoenix Capital, continuing her mission of ethical business practices on a larger scale. Their professional paths would indeed diverge, but their personal paths had converged in ways neither could have imagined. That night, Alexis found Daniel examining confidential documents in her conference room. From adversaries to allies to something deeper and more complex, a relationship built through crises, cemented by shared purpose, and now evolving toward whatever lay ahead. 3 weeks later, Daniel stood in his new office at Monroe Industries, reviewing the latest clinical trial protocols for the artificial pancreas technology. The progress was encouraging, faster than initially projected, with promising preliminary results. A knock at his door interrupted his concentration. Richard Harlow entered, looking marginally better than during their confrontation with Bennett. The cancer treatments were brutal, but he was fighting with characteristic determination. The board is impressed with your leadership, Harlow said without preamble, particularly your ability to bridge the gap between the technical team and the financial realities. Thank you. The team is exceptional. They just needed someone to translate between the scientists and the accountants. A rare skill. Harlow settled into a chair, conserving energy. And how is Ava adjusting to your new schedule? Remarkably well. She's excited about the technology, asks for updates every day. As does my granddaughter. Harlow smiled faintly. Children adapt better than we give them credit for. To new circumstances, new routines, new family configurations. The deliberate phrasing made Daniel look up sharply. Harlow's expression was knowing. Alexis seems happier than I've ever seen her, he continued casually. More balanced. The private equity deal was quite favorable, I understand. It was. Daniel wasn't surprised that Harlow kept tabs on Alexis's business dealings. Phoenix Capital will expand significantly under the new investment, with Alexis remaining as strategic advisor rather than day-to-day manager. An interesting choice for someone who's always been hands-on. Daniel said nothing, unwilling to discuss the personal factors influencing Alexis's decision. Her desire for more flexibility, more time with him and Ava, a better work-life balance than she'd ever allowed herself before. Harlow didn't press. Life takes unexpected turns, doesn't it? A year ago, you were cleaning offices at night. Alexis was CEO. I was focused solely on Monroe Industries' stock price. He gazed out the window, momentarily distant. Now you're leading our most promising division. Alexis is reinventing business consulting, and I'm reevaluating priorities in the time I have left. The doctors are still hopeful about your treatment, Daniel reminded him. Perhaps, but either way I've gained perspective about what matters. Harlow stood, moving toward the door. The artificial pancreas technology. When do you project it will be ready for broader clinical trials? 12 months if current progress holds. Full market availability within 3 years. Harlow nodded, satisfaction evident despite his reserved demeanor. My granddaughter will be 10, your Ava 12, old enough to truly appreciate the freedom it will give them. That's the hope. More than hope, Mr. Cole, certainty. Because unlike Bennett, you understand that some innovations transcend profit margins. Some technologies actually need to reach the people who will benefit most. Harlow's gaze was direct, approving. A perspective gained perhaps from seeing a company at every level, from the boardroom to the maintenance closet and back again. After Harlow left, Daniel returned to the clinical trial protocols, renewed determination fueling his focus. The technology would advance. Children like Ava and Harlow's granddaughter would benefit. The corporate fraud they'd exposed had ultimately led to something positive, innovation that might otherwise have been suppressed, now moving forward at accelerated pace. That evening, he left work at a reasonable hour, another change from his Wall Street days. At Ava's school, he found her waiting with Alexis, who had picked her up after a meeting nearby. Daddy, Ava called, running to him. Miss Monroe helped me with my science project. We're growing special plants that Native Americans used for medicine. That sounds fascinating, Daniel said, meeting Alexis's eyes over their daughter's head. The warmth there, the sense of shared purpose and joy confirmed everything they'd been building these past weeks. I thought we could have dinner at that new place near the lake, Alexis suggested. They have an excellent children's menu with proper nutritional information for diabetes management. Can we, Daddy, please? Ava's excitement was infectious. Absolutely. Daniel took his daughter's hand, reaching for Alexis's with his other. The three of them walked toward the car, connected physically and emotionally. Their journey had begun with confrontation in a boardroom, a janitor standing up to a CEO about a $4.2 billion deal. It had evolved through crisis revelation and transformation. Now it continued in this new configuration, still unfolding, still defining itself day by day. Not a traditional family, perhaps, but a unit forged through extraordinary circumstances, bound by mutual respect, shared purpose, and deepening affection. A testament to the unexpected connections that can emerge when people choose principle over expedience, courage over comfort, and openness to possibility over rigid definitions. As they drove toward the restaurant, Ava chattering happily between them, Daniel caught Alexis's eye. The understanding that passed between them needed no words acknowledgement of how far they'd come, in anticipation of the path still unfolding before them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, professional transitions, Ava's ongoing medical needs, the complexities of building a relationship amid their unique circumstances, they would face them together. Not as CEO and janitor, not as benefactor and recipient, but as equal partners in the truest sense. Sometimes the most valuable connections aren't formed through conventional paths, but through moments of courage and principle. Sometimes standing up in a boardroom and saying, "Don't sign that deal," is the first step toward not just professional redemption, but personal transformation. And sometimes, against all odds and expectations, the janitor and the CEO find in each other exactly what they each needed most. Someone who sees them not for their title or circumstances, but for who they truly are and who they might become together.